which are $10 student and low income and $25 a year for a regular membership. But it's not a lot of income. We get a little under $8,000 a year. So we can no longer afford to pay staff, and we just, the one thing we have kept is a small office in Sacramento so that we can maintain that presence, with the legislators and continue to have influence on bills and laws.
Good. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about some specific advocacy efforts and some of the laws that have or haven't been passed over the past couple of years. But the Department on Disability, in conjunction with the Emergency Management Department and with technical support and production assistance from CityView, recently produced a series of public service announcements aimed at persons with disabilities and their families. We're going to preview one of those on this program, and we're going to be showing them over the next series of programs because we think they're pretty good. So please take a look.
Ensuring that you, your family, and your home are prepared for a disaster is critical. Be self-reliant and assume responsibility for your own safety and that of your family.
Another one that we did with Richard.
Learn what you will need to know for each emergency. Learn how to evacuate and how to shelter in place. Practice your plan and ensure that everyone in the family knows where emergency equipment is located, where your designated meeting place is, and where you may be evacuated to in the area. You may need to duct tape your windows and frames if you're asked to shelter in place. If you have to evacuate, gloves will protect your hands from glass and or debris that you may need to move or maneuver. In order to reduce hazards, heavy objects should be kept on lower shelves. All heavy furniture, like shelves, bookcases, pictures, mirrors, etc., should not hang over or near beds and should be anchored in place. Water heaters should be strapped down. Make sure you know how to shut off your water, gas, and electricity if necessary. You'll also need to show your neighbors, family, and others where your connections are and the instructions for turning them off. Ensure that cupboards and drawers have latches. You should also keep fire extinguishers in your kitchen, garage, and bedroom.
You will need to protect yourself during and after an earthquake, as aftershocks might occur. If you use a wheelchair, ensure a safe location, lock your brakes, and cover your head and neck with your hands. If you're in bed, stay put and cover your head. If possible, get underneath a sturdy table or desk.
To keep informed of current news and instructions, such as sheltering in place, evacuation orders, or boil water orders. A battery-operated TV or radio is a must in these situations. If you're deaf or hard of hearing, you'll need to find alternate ways to ensure that you can keep informed and communicate with neighbors and first responders. Only you know what can prepare and assist you and your family during a disaster. Are you prepared? For additional information, please contact the Department on Disability or the Emergency Management Department by calling the numbers on the screen or by dialing 311.
We're back on Disability Forum with our guest, Laura Williams, who's the president of Californians for Disability Rights. And Laura, over the past couple of years, a lot of bills come before the legislature dealing with all aspects of disability. Let's talk about a couple of issues that you think are important to folks with disabilities here.
Okay. I guess the one that concerns me this year is SB 1608, which the governor just recently signed. And I'd like to sort of go back and preface what brought about SB 1608. Back in 2000, a whole group of the business organizations, the chamber, the restaurant associations, and many other business associations started meeting with disability advocates, and it was clear that what they were wanting was a way to slow down compliance, to have an out if it's difficult, to just make it a little tougher to gain compliance, and particularly to stop lawsuits. And of course, unfortunately, as we're all aware, or should be, is the primary compliance tool for access laws are in civil litigation, in civil court. If you can't get it through an administrative ruling through your city building official, or if you can't convince the owner to do the right thing, then there really is no other option other than to file a lawsuit. They like to state that there's been 58,260 lawsuits in California over the last couple of decades. And I look at that and I think, when I look at the California statistics, I think there's probably well over 600,000 business establishments, public accommodations that are required to provide access. So we're really talking about less than 10% that have been sued. SB 1608, it has a few good things in it, and it also has some things that are going to make it more difficult to actually get compliance, particularly with the larger businesses. And that concerns me, just in the direction that we've gone.
One of the things, bringing it close to home, is it requires some things of local building officials and, for example, our Department of Building and Safety. And I should say that our Department of Building and Safety's access specialist was wholly unaware of the bill until I brought it to her attention. So what are local communities, building departments required to do in order to comply with 1608 now that it's passed?
Well, 1608 tied into previous legislation called the Certified Access Specialist Program, and that was a voluntary Certified Access Specialist Program. 1608 has made it mandatory on city and local governments. Effective in May of 2010, every local building department will have to either hire or contract with a certified access specialist that is certified through the state of California and a lengthy certification test in order to sign off on any access drawings or any access things. We're very concerned about that it's going to gum up the works, that people are going to, again, blame the disability community because they can't get their plans off the books, and time is money, and it's just going to take a long time. And our fear is that it'll be too easy to walk away from access rather than to actually comply.
Well, and as we talked before the program, they've given the test that they're apparently going to use, and hardly anyone passed it.
That's what I've heard. And my fear and our fear is that they're going to then downgrade the test, and that's the wrong thing to do. Downgrading the test won't give us compliance and won't give us access. It'll just generate more lawsuits when they build it wrong. So I encourage all cities and local governments, please don't complain about how hard the test is and ask them to downgrade it because we want access.
Now, Laura's organization and my organization, our California affiliate of ACB, we were very vocally opposed to the bill, but you know, in politics and advocacy, you win a few and you lose a few, and we didn't win this one. In a couple of minutes remaining, highlight another area that legislatively that CDR is involved with. Well,
CDR, because we're so small, we typically work on small bills if we're sponsoring them. And last year, we did get 463 passed and signed into law, which is a parking utilization law, which enables every Californian with a handicap parking placard and or license plate to park across two standard parking spaces if the accessible space is not readily available. And if they require that extra room for any of the equipment they may have, the assistive equipment, whether that be an oxygen tank or a wheelchair or a walker, and any room they need to get in and out of the car, and to remain parked across two parking spaces without being ticketed and towed.
And I should say that our Department on Disability, we're asked to respond to a number of proposed bills, and I specifically responded to the Mayor's Office and Chief Legislative Analyst's Office that we should support that bill, and the city did. Well,
Appreciate that.
yeah. Why don't you give us your contact information for CDR, since you have local chapters in the Los Angeles city and county area. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you.
The easiest way is through our webpage at www.disabilityrights.cdr.org, and then click on the chapters page and you will get to the contacts for someone in your local area. If you want to leave a message at the Capitol office in Sacramento, that number is 800-838-9237, and please leave a message. Our office is only staffed part-time, usually when I'm in Sacramento, and that's only a couple of days every couple of months. So the best way is to leave a message, and someone will get back to you. And thank you so much.
Very good, and I do want to thank Laura Williams, President of Californians for Disability Rights, for being with us on this episode of Disability Forum. Again, if you would like information about the Department on Disability, you may reach us by phone at 213-485-6334 voice or 213-485-6655 TTY, or via email at www.lacity.org/DOD. Also, if you have a question or comment about Disability Forum, please email me directly at Mitch, M-I-T-C-H, .Pomerantz, P-O-M-E-R-A-N-T-Z, @lacity.org. This has been Disability Forum with your host, Mitch Pomerantz. Until next time, thanks for watching and take care. Aftermath of a disaster, you may not be able to rely on your knowledge of your home. You might also not be able to rely on your guide dog. The dog may be injured, frightened, confused, panicky, and/or disoriented. Be prepared to calm your dog and to keep it confined and securely leashed and/or harnessed. If you use a cane, remember to keep it readily available to assist you around hazards and obstacles. Keep a spare by your bed and at all exit doors, as well as a spare leash for the dog. Ensure that your guide dog is microchipped and that their license and identification tag have current contact information. Guide dogs can accompany you to an emergency shelter. Just as you need to prepare an emergency kit for yourself, you need to have one for your dog. Ensure you have enough water, food, any medications they may require, and a first aid kit. A blanket, a rug, and favorite toy may help calm them as well. Keep your veterinarian's name and number in the kit. Vaccination records may be required at the shelter. Only you know what can prepare and assist you and your family during a disaster. Are you prepared? For additional information, please contact the Department on Disability or the Emergency Management Department by calling the numbers on the screen or by dialing 311.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Alarcon excused also. Do you have the excuses? I show Weezard, Perry, Zine, and Cardenas, 35. Mr. Reyes, thank you. So we have first presentation. Mr. Parks, are you ready, sir? Mr. Parks, you ready? Okay. Are we alive yet? Yes. All right, good morning. Thank you, Mr. President Garcetti. Good morning. This is Friday, May 7th, Los Angeles City Council meeting. I'm Councilmember Zine, joined by my colleagues, Councilmember LaBonge, Mr. Parks, Ms. Perry, Mr. Reyes, and Mr. Garcetti. We're waiting additional members to arrive. We're going to begin with our presentations, and our first presentation from District 8, Councilmember Bernard Parks. Mr. Parks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today we have an opportunity to honor a group of champions from the 8th District. I'd like to ask Coach Ambers, Robert Ambers, to come up, and all of the View Park Prep High School football team. Come on up. Come on over. Colleagues, View Park Prep has a reputation throughout the state as being probably in the top 3 to 5% academically in the state of California. But today we're honoring student athletes who are part of a powerhouse football program in the Crenshaw District, one that has basically won their league by an overwhelming show of power in the 8-man championship title game for the second consecutive year. View Park has 13 wins, 0 losses, so they were undefeated this year, and they won their championship game a score of 56-22 over Van Nuys Fulton Prep on Thursday, December of this year. They also have a star quarterback. Leon Garrett has thrown for over 2,000 yards, 32 touchdowns, and they have a tailback, is that Devlin Elliott, has scored 33 touchdowns this year, 28 rushing, 2 on kickoff returns, and 3 on interceptions. So he obviously plays offense and defense. They also have, we're honoring today, a 2-way junior lineman, Jonathan Simpson, 6'1", 245 pounds, is the anchor up front on both sides of the ball. Arizona and UCLA, and let me write this in, and SC are already showing interest, according to his coach. Linebacker Anthony Bradley and running back Kamale Hawkins are the focal point of the night running attack in the Wildcat, and other standouts are here today in this high-scoring team that average 56 points per game while limiting opponents to 17 points. One of their victories was a 64-14 decision over Fulton in Game 3. Today I'd like to commend View Park Prep in recognition of their hard-fought dedication in being champions of the league for the second consecutive year. I'd like to give a certificate to Coach Ambers, but we'll present a certificate for each player when we do the photos in the back. So Coach Ambers. Come on up. Who's going to speak for the team? I'd like a student to speak for the team. Yeah. Okay, Leon, come on up here. You speak now. No, you first. You first, Coach. Okay, Leon, you come in right after.
So I just want to say thank you. You know, we're honored to be here today. One of the things that we believe in View Park is develop the mind, develop the body. We believe in being champions on the field and off the field. And we want these young men to come back to the community and be like Bernard Parks. 40 years ago, Bernard Parks coached at the same very field that we play. He coached Warren Moon. He's grew up in the community and became police chief. We want these young men to be just like Bernard Parks, to go to college, come back to the community, be doctors, lawyers, police chief, all in their own business. So thank you very much for having us today. We're very honored. Thank you.
Mr. Reyes and Mr. LaBonge. Yes, Mr. Parks? Hold on, Ed, hold on a second. Mr. Reyes.
Let me just ask Leon Garrett to represent the team as one of the student athletes to make comments.
Okay, and then Mr. Reyes and Mr. LaBonge. Go ahead, sir.
On behalf of the team, we'd like to thank you for honoring us as not only as athletes, but as student-wise too. It's like our coach pretty much summed it up, that we are student athletes. We are not Spartan warriors, we are Athenians, then Spartans. Our work always comes first, and this team right here is pretty much a family. It's a family thing, and we work hard as a family, we stay together. That's how we work as a team, just by working together, and that's how you become champions. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to rise and congratulate the young men for their accomplishments and thank Councilman Bernard Parks for making sure that we get to recognize and celebrate your achievements. Now, I've been told there are 26,000 gang members in Los Angeles. But you should know there's hundreds of thousands of good people watching this at this very moment and more tonight. And so all of your victories on the field and your victory of to be able to play on the field and excel in your goals, like has been said, I'm hoping that you keep focused on a professional life afterwards. I'm hoping that all the challenges will come to you as you go through the process of achieving education to remain as strong as your winning record shows. And there'll be hundreds of thousands of people watching you. So this horseshoe might seem a little empty at this moment, but I can tell you there are thousands and thousands of people listening and are grateful, but more importantly, we're showing them that young people of Los Angeles have the ability to accomplish and to get ahead, and for that you should be thanked. So congratulations.
Mr. LaBonge, Tom LaBonge.
Mr. President, Mr. Parks, why Mr. Parks stands off in here, there's a lot of champions coming out of the 8th District because there's great coaches behind them, and those coaches are great teachers. I'm only a little disappointed that the center of your championship team is not here today because there's an old center. It all starts with the center, the snap of the ball, the drive off the stance into your opponent, and the march to victory. I'm proud of what your coach said about the ambitions that many of you have, and just work hard, and there's nothing like being a champion. I wasn't on a championship team, but you're on that team, and no one can take away that you were champions in the CIF in your division. Congratulations to your great school and coach. Good job.
Ms. Perry. Ms. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say also congratulations to the young men for being such incredible role models and male role models to the other young men who will come behind them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Parks?
Thank you very much, colleagues. We'll go back and take some photos.
All right, thank you very much. Congratulations again for the winning team, and good success ahead. Our next presentation from CD4, Councilmember Tom LaBonge, CD4.
Hey, Bernard, you know Tommy Plummer? Yeah. From a group of champions to a very special champion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big hand for Tommy Plummer, who's retiring today after 37 years. 37 years of dedication and helping the city move. He started with the Department of Recreation and Parks in 1967, and through a series of promotion, has ended up someone who is involved with our city's Department of Transportation Special Traffic Operations. At any major event in the city, it was Tommy Plummer, who was the quarterback, the center, the guard, the tackle. He was the whole combination of trying to make sure that event went well. The marathons, every one of them. The Academy Awards, the events of the Grammys, special events at the Coliseum. Tommy Plummer has been there. And I didn't want to let him get away without getting recognized because he has made so much difference in these events that we go to and have. As I said, over the years, he's done many things to improve the department's outlook. He's also involved in neighborhood councils in his very own neighborhood, with Councilman Parks, and I just wanted to salute you, Tommy, that by adoption of this resolution, this city council, along with the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, does hereby salute and commend Tommy Plummer for his great devotion to the city of Los Angeles. And I personally want to say what a pleasure it was working with you, because every time I was on the scene and you were on the scene, I knew things were happening right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's salute Tommy Plummer for his 37 years of service to Los Angeles. Hey, you guys smile. Okay. You want to say something? Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to thank Tom Lavange. He's a very special person. When we're doing these events out there that he just named off, he usually come out and make sure everything is running, and he'll usually hollow out anything he needs. We take care of it for him, and he's been an excellent councilman. I also want to thank just two people, Nancy Wagstaff and Marco. They're the team members, so when traffic is tied up in the city a little bit, you can kind of...
Yeah, we're not used to see Nancy. Good to see Marco. Give them a hand as well.
So we also want to thank the city of Los Angeles too, and basically all the city councilmen. If the mayor, if he's listening, you're looking, we want to thank him. And it's been a great ride. I advise anybody to work for the city of Los Angeles. It's a great place to work. And we're going through some difficulties, but we'll be okay. And thank you very much, Tom.
Give me what you say on the microphone last thing. What do you say? All right, this is a sign out for Tommy Plummer.
When you're signing out, they give you a chance to sign out on your radio, and it would be Tom Adam 17 signing out. It's the end of my shift, and won't be back.
All right, Tom, LM17, give him a big hand. Tommy Plummer.
And to watch. Tommy Plummer, I'm to watch. Our next presentation from District 15, Councilmember Janice Hahn. Councilmember Hahn? Councilmember Hahn, we're ready? All right, how about 14, Mr. Weezar? Okay, we will hold for, those are our last two presentations. So we will hold till we can, all right, do we have the roll ready? Let's go. Okay, we'll take the roll, please.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Weezer, Koretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Very well, thank you. Let's go through the agenda while we have a few moments while we gather up the next two presentations.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Smith and Mr. Koretz, seconds.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Weezar and Ms. Hahn, seconds.
Mr. President, would you like to run through the agenda?
Please do the agenda now.
Items 1 through 4 are items noticed for public hearing, and there is a card on item 4.
Let's hold number 4 then. On the 1, 2, and 3, no specials. Open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Very well.
And those ordinances will be held over 1 week.
Right. Next items, please.
Items 5 through 11 are items for which public hearings have been held. Reports have been submitted and distributed on items 7, 8, and 9, and there is also a request to continue item 10 to Tuesday, May 11th.
On 10, continued without objection to the 11th. You have cards on 7, 8, and 9?
I have cards on 7 and 8. Both have had public hearing, and there is one on 11, but they've all had public hearing.
I don't see a card on 7. I do see one card on 8. I don't see one on 7.
Yeah, the cards are right here on 7.
Oh, they pulled them off. Okay, okay.
Had a public hearing, but let's call 7 special.
All right, we'll call 7 special. We'll call 7 special. If there's no cards in the others...
There are cards, but there has been public hearing on those items, so a motion would be required.
No one's calling them special? So, hold on a second. You want 11? 11 is special for Mr. Rosendahl. On the remaining items, back to committee on 5. 7 special, Mr. Garcetti. So 5, Any other items, colleagues? Any specials? On the remaining, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
On number 9, forthwith, please. Next section, please.
Items 12 through 19 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration, and there are cards on items 12 and 19.
So let's hold 12 and 19 for special. On the remaining, any specials? Seeing none, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item, please.
Council does have a special meeting. You may wish to take that up later, or do you wish to call the...
No, let's do that. Let's do that later.
That brings council back to public comment or presentations.
Mr. Weezer, are you ready now?
And my guests are on their way. They had trouble parking today.
All right. Ms. Hahn, are you ready for your presentation? If not, we'll proceed with the agenda. Ms. Hahn? I think she's ready. Ms. Hahn, you ready? All right, Ms. Hahn, you're up then. Okay, you're up, Ms. Hahn. CD 15.
Okay, you guys want to come stand by me? Okay, thank you. We had to bring the entire San Pedro High School basketball team in another way since they were stuck out in the hallway, not being allowed to enter. So, colleagues, I have here today the San Pedro High School basketball team, this year's CIF Los Angeles City Section Division II champions. Hear it. You know, this is especially exciting. I'm impressed by this team's incredible showing this season. The Pirates opened the season by winning the Beverly Hills tournament against Santa Monica High School and went on to clinch the championship in a 65-47 victory over University High on March 5th. They won 20 games in all during this remarkable season, holding their opponents to just under 50 points in 7 straight games. Go Pirates. 3 players also earned All-City honors this year: Tyler Rogosic, Andre Rodriguez, and Brandon Herboka. Are you clapping because I pronounced it right, or just? Brandon was also selected as the Los Angeles City Section Division II Player of the Year, and Coach John Bobich was selected as the City Section Division II Coach of the Year. Go Coach! Woo! You know, but we always like to say that not only are these guys exceptional athletes, they are also outstanding students. The team has an overall grade point average of 3.3 with 5 players who are earning a 4.0 GPA. That is worth more applause. Again, congratulations, Pirates. We are so proud of you. And once again, San Pedro High School has given me good bragging rights down here among my colleagues on the City Council. I have certificates for all the players, coaches, and managers that I will pass out in the back. But I have this very special plaque to present to Coach Bobich. John, Coach, thank you, and I know your dad would be very proud, certainly. And so on behalf of the City of Los Angeles, I wanted to give you this plaque really congratulating all the champions on this incredibly exceptional team, and I'd like to have you say a few words.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Janice Hahn. Thank you to the council for inviting us down here. We're very proud of representing the city of San Pedro, and like Ms. Hahn said, that the team averaged a 3.0 GPA, and on the basketball court we brought home this championship. So again, thank you to everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I'll pass out all the certificates in the back. Yeah, we'll go this way. Thank you. Oh, wait.
President, Ms. Hahn.
Mr.
Yes.
Labange.
Cathedral High, congratulations, following another great high school champions. I said to Mr. Parks, congratulations, because there's a lot of champions come out of the 8th District. But then I thought about the 15th and Janice Hahn. Every champion, every shoe that every champion wears probably came through the 15th and the Port of Los Angeles on their way to their championship season, whether it's an athletic field, a basketball court, or anywhere else. Congratulations, champions, and work with the young people in your neighborhood to teach the good skills that you learned under your coaches to help others. Congratulations.
Go Pirates. Okay.
And Mr. Labange, those same shoes that came out of CD 15 ended up in CD 3 at El Camino High, where they just won the National Decathlon. So LA is doing very well in sports and academics. Congratulations to all. Thank you. Mr. Weezar. Passed by CD 2, Mr. Krikorian. They passed by your district too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And colleagues and public, it gives me great honor today to recognize an individual who comes from Ball Heights and Salesian High School, Mr. Tom Labange, from my alma mater, Raul Armendariz, who owns a ranch called Rancho Armendariz. It is located on 50 beautiful acres in Southern California. Rancho Armendariz began its professional show debut in 2003 and since then has not looked back, winning award after award. Their horses have won over 80 gold medal and championship titles, including over 30 national championships. 2007 and 2008 were great show years for Rancho Armendariz, earning them the highest honor any breeder could receive. Their breeding program at Rancho Armendariz is second to none, with all their standing stallions imported from some of the most prestigious farms in Spain, where they are carefully selected for their functionality and movement. Though what's truly impressive about Raul and Rancho Armendariz is not just the horses they breed, but also their genuine love for the animals and the sincere effort to share that passion for animals by exposing inner city youth to their championship horses. Today we are honoring Raul Armendariz not only for the wonderful horses he breeds, but for giving back to a community where he grew up, exposing our young people to breeding and the wonderful horses that come from his ranch and from Spain, and also donating to his alma mater, Salesian High School in Ball Heights. Last year, I had the privilege of riding one of Raul's horses in the East Los Angeles Parade, and let me tell you, it was a dream for me to do that, and the horse certainly made me look a much better rider than I really am. So thank you, Raul. So on behalf of the City of Los Angeles, I wanted to recognize Rancho Armendariz, Raul Armendariz, and the alumnus from Salesian High School in Ball Heights, and thank you for giving back, and thank you for bringing this type of showmanship to the inner city and for doing the wonderful work you do breeding these beautiful horses. Thank you so much on behalf of the City of Los Angeles.
Say a few words. Thank you, Councilman Weezar. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I thank my father that's passed two years ago and my mom that's present here. I'm really glad that they decided to make their homes here, and I was born in LA, and it's been nothing but good experiences. I did grow up here in South Central in the heart of the inner city, and I always came to the downtown Los Angeles library when I was in high school at Salesian High School, like Mr. Weezar said. And I always said, hey, one of these days I want to come into one of these big high-rises, maybe even work for them. I had the pleasure of working for the federal government down the street at the Federal Building, but I never came into City Hall, and just about and September 16th they had a celebration, and I walked through the hall just to go to the parking lot, but I've never been in these chambers, and I'm quite honored, and I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very glad to try to serve as a role model to the kids and to say, hey, all you have to do is tener ganas. If you want to be successful, all you have to do is have ganas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That rings so true, tener ganas. And Raul, do you want to introduce your family?
Yes. This is my wife, Ramona Victoria Armendariz, my daughter Juliet, my son Raul II, my daughter Jessica Armendariz, and my beautiful mother, Nicolasa Armendariz, my compadre Ruben Alvarez, and his wife, and Araceli Alvarez, and I think that's it. The rest, we have other kids, but they're in school.
Very beautiful family. Mr. LaBonge, for comments.
Mr. Weezer, I just have a question for Raul. Coming from Salesian and being a Mustang, do you think that had anything to do with where you are today? Let's hear it for the Salesian Mustangs.
Congratulations to you.
The love
for your
for the
success.
horse. He said it's a love for the horse, and again, I want to thank him because, you know, in Mexico we have a culture of the charreada, and showing the sportsmanship and the beauty of horses and the talent that they have. So I want to thank you for continuing our culture in our country and for the work you do with our kids. Thank you again.
Thank you. Congratulations once again to you for your success. That completes our presentations. Colleagues, we have a few cards on public comment. And let's take public comment now. Walter Bechtel. Walter Bechtel, public comment. Walter Bechtel, are you in the chambers? I don't see Walter Bechtel. Dr. Williams, Dr. Clyde Williams. Dr. Clyde Williams.
I'm sorry? Well, that's going to be on the card for a second. The rental. Number 7. I'm sorry. I didn't fill it out completely. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, Dr. Williams, take a breath. Now I saw you run down the aisle.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. Part of the Communities Against 710, or Stop the 710, whichever is easiest. MTA will be considering the 710 this month. So we're quite concerned about how the Los Angeles City representatives will be presenting to the MTA board and to the committees. Basically, it's roughly a $10 billion tunnel system. However, there's about 50% of it will be in portals, which will be cut and cover excavation on the surface. I love tunnels for the right place. The toll estimated now will be $15 each way. So a $30 round trip a day seems a little expensive, but it'll most likely be subsidized by some other means in order to get users up. The Caltrans property. Well, they've been delaying for 30 years to sell it back to the tenants, and they're trying to force the tenants out. So, what can we do? I don't know. I know that the tunnel system will not help the western San Gabriel Valley traffic situation because there are no interchanges. However, the most important thing I think about it, especially during the situation of the last 2 weeks, is what is commonly called the Titanic effect. That is, 2 well-placed vans with 55-gallon drums of gasoline in them and a road flare can incinerate both tunnels in a matter of a few minutes to hours, remembering that each vehicle has gasoline and diesel in it.
Thank you. Michael Tony. Michael Tony. Walter Bechtel, you'll be after Mr. Tony.
Okay. I've got some papers for you here on accelerator colliders. A correction. I've shown you how on here basically where the formula comes from the primary work, forward ejection electrons in ion collisions, Denmark, 1984, Aarhus, Denmark. Essentially what's happening is you're getting a huge amount of electrons coming through when you collide these hydrogen particles. 1 gram will generate about 20 million amps with at about 1,000 volts, which ends up being about, I had said 55 million watt hours per gram. You get actually something around 5 million watt hours per gram of collided H2 plus ions. So this is definitely not thermodynamic. The source of energy is conversion of these electron streams traveling about an 18th the speed of light through some kind of pickup coil like a transformer. So with Obama wanting to go to the nuclear business, etc., you have a possibility here to make the air in Los Angeles and across the planet pristine, perhaps working in conjunction with the federal government. I hope to send some of this information to Speaker of the House Pelosi and David Axelrod, one of Obama's advisors, see if there could be some and also Arnold Schwarzenegger's before he's got, see if there could be something generated in this direction. Wall Street is not going to do it, of course, and look what happened with the Greek meltdown there. Thanks for the time.
Mr. Bechtel, followed by William Morrison. William Morrison will be after Mr. Bechtel.
Good morning. Thank you. We had a big crowd out there. I couldn't get in the door. So, but I just wanted to reiterate something I already talked about. Some people calling people names on the radio, and I want to say that I'm not an anarchist or a racist, or that's become cliche to say racist. But I was right there helping the black people all during that time, during the 60s and the 70s, and for somebody to come along and make fun of somebody, anybody from another race, is a problem that I don't think it's a touche kind of a situation. Nobody likes to be called names or be made fun of, although different people of different races react differently to that sort of thing. But that's not what really shocked me on Saturday morning when the president made his speech about predator drones, etc. Later on during the day, when the person from Pakistan attacked New York, he indicated that he didn't like predator drones attacking his people in Pakistan, and it appears to me that the executive branch of the government was well aware of this situation before it took place, and I think that it's expeditious to prevent such problems before they occur, rather than use them as a political agenda or a kind of a means by which that you can indicate your abilities to control a situation. I think crime prevention may not get as much attention as it should get, but I think that too many people's lives are put at risk waiting until a situation happens rather than stopping it before it happens.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel. Mr. Morrison, followed by...
Morning, Council members. William Morrison for State Senate. Actually, I'm here. There's a main reason why this city is in a bad deficit. Most of you council members know that have been elected in office more than once or twice, which have held office on, we'll say, assembly level, senate level, that you're getting a double paycheck. So maybe we should cut that out and give that money back to the state. So this way, we'll get out of this deficit. So you know which members I'm talking about, since you have assemblyman up there and a senator that's getting a check, 2 checks. As your senator, once I win my election in November, I will make sure that there's a bill written on it, so this will stop that whole process so we can get some of our money back. Now, I met with a couple of people that are running for state offices yesterday for lunch. One advised also, which he's going to be the next tax assessor, that people should get their taxes reassessed. because we're getting overcharged. Since you're cutting services, you need to give back that money. And I hope this person wins, so this way that we can get our money back as property owners, business owners also. Okay, and I'm also leading up the recall on Antonio, on the mayor, since I can't mention his name, on the mayor. So if anybody wants to see me afterwards, I'll be sitting on the side. You can come see me. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Arnold Sachs. Arnold Sachs, our next speaker. Followed by Esther Lofton. Esther Lofton will be after Mr. Sachs.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Arnold Sachs. You have on your agenda today an item regarding the rent increase moratorium. But on Saturday, the MTA is going to be having hearings regarding a fare increase. And since you're so adamant about a rent increase moratorium, I certainly hope that you will back a moratorium on the fare increase for Metro, because pretty much the same people who are facing the rent increases are the ones, the low-income users that use the Metro system and will be directly affected by the rate increase that's proposed by Metro. Switching gears a little bit, it was wonderful, and not taking anything away from the awards received by the two scholastic teams today, but it was really impressive listening to the council people discuss their achievements and how wonderful they did, and how this, and then this guy did that, and we know this, and we know that. Yet when the DWP rate increase was before the city council, half of you didn't know what it was going to be. Half of you didn't know that it was either going to be for 3 months or for permanent. So how can you know so much about scholastic teams, but so little about what faces the city? And not only that, but the mayor chipped in. But the mayor hasn't said whether he knew if it was for 3 months or a permanent increase. I'd like to know what his answer to that question was. He was saying, we need this increase to get the green program. And if you noticed in the Daily Breeze, there was an editorial, BP will pay for this cleanup, to clean up this mess, talking about the oil spill. And then it shows, yeah, right, the price of gas going up. So if you change that and said, DWP will pay for the greening of LA, yeah, right, watch your rates increase.
Esther Lofton.
Good morning. Esther Lofton, widow of a Buffalo soldier. In this nation of equality under law for Americans, my son, Michael L. Lofton, a 30-year employee of LADWP, has been deprived of all retirement benefits without cause, while CBS reported at 11 p.m. yesterday evening that employees photographed during work hours enjoying adult activities or drunk driving have been shifted to yard duties and are still on full salary. I'm here pursuant to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, and I don't need to contrast what happened to those guys to what is happening to my son. For the incidents or the violations against Michael Lofton should stand alone in this country of equality under law. No response? Good, that's why
Thank you, ma'am. We don't respond on public comment. It's your time to make a statement. It's not a dialogue.
I do have representation.
Martin Hangline. Martin Hangline. Martin in the chambers. Michael Huberman. Hubman. Michael Hubman. Ma'am, your name?
Yes, Lan Taiwan.
Say that again.
Lan Taiwan.
Land? No, you're not up yet. We're looking for Martin. Martin. Hainline. I don't think Martin Hainline's here. Michael Hubman. Michael Hubman. Let's go to the Valley. Daniel Gus in Van Nuys. Daniel Gus in Van Nuys.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilmember Zine, for always being a leader on humane issues in the city. You and Cliff Ruff have done very good by the animal shelters. Same thing for Herb Wesson and Paul Koretz. Thank you every week for trying to save a life. So Zine, Wesson, and Koretz, thank you very, very much. I wanted to thank another city council member who has done amazing things for local animal shelters. Unfortunately, that city council member who deserves the kudos is not here in Los Angeles, but they're down in Long Beach. So major thumbs up to Suha Lowenthal of the 2nd District in Long Beach, who has led the charge on expanding spay-neuter resources, adding veterans to the Long Beach shelters, introducing cat licensing, which will increase revenue and save lives, implementing mobile adoptions further, and expanding volunteer efforts in the shelters down in Long Beach. If Councilmember Suha Lowenthal can do that in Long Beach, I don't know why we're not doing it here in Los Angeles. But to quote the council member in Long Beach, it is unacceptable to do the same thing we have been doing for years and expect different results. That is not the definition of leadership on this or any other issue. So I hope one of the council members around the horseshoe will pick up and make Los Angeles at least as good as Long Beach. On the other hand, the GM candidates for the shelter in Los Angeles are not being asked about their financial qualifications, their views on licensing dogs or cats, and what new ideas they're going to bring to the City of Los Angeles shelters. Antonio Villaraigosa is apparently not aware of these problems, that they're not being asked the right questions. He will be termed out, but the problems will still be in Parks, Perry's, and Alarcon's district. Why can't Los Angeles be as good as Long Beach, if not better? RecallCityHall.org. Thank you. Thank you, Zine, Wesson, and Koretz.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Frank Sheftel, back in Van Nuys one more time. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councilman Zine. We're very lonely out here. I noticed that you're full out there in Los Angeles, but there's 3 of us in this huge room here. We miss having you out here. I know you guys voted not to come out here to save some money for the next few months, but we can't wait to have you back. It's very lonely. Maybe we could rent the space out for a bar mitzvah or a wedding or some other event to get some revenue for the city, but we really do miss you when you have all this space here. But I appreciate having the opportunity to come and speak with you. This week, letters went out. City gives notice to pot shops to close up, the ones that weren't on the pre-ICO list. You know, I'm a medical marijuana patient. I'm a founder of a collective that's on the pre-ICO list. We were on the list of ones that were to remain open. Last month, I was pleased to get a letter from the city that said to begin the live scan process and to begin the process to register a notice of intent, and we began that. And so I was a little bit surprised when I, too, was watching the news the other day and saw the collective that I'm a member of and founded on the closure list. And so I immediately did some research and found out that we were on that list as well. I contacted the representatives from the police department, from the city clerk. Everybody assured me, no, you're okay, you're on the list, you're good to go. The city attorney finally was able to contact somebody who said, yes, we did make a mistake. Amazing that they admitted that. So I just want to assure everybody that TLC is on the list to remain open, but it just shows a sign when I ran for city council that departments aren't talking to each other. All they needed to do was send the list over to the city clerk and have them review it before they sent it out to avoid those problems. So, I'm hoping that we get the support. Councilman Labange's office have come out. I dealt with Alice Roth. She's a very nice woman. 2.5 hours late to the appointment, but she did come out, and I appreciate having the input and the support from our community. I appreciate all of the departments. They've been wonderful. Sergeant Heaney, Sharon Dickinson at the city clerk, and we look forward to going through with this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Back here to City Hall, Lan Tai Hang. Now it's your turn, ma'am. And that's our last card on public speaker. If you are here for an item, the speaker card must be turned in before the item is called. So if you're here for an item, the speaker card must be turned in before the item is called. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning. Hello. This is the issue. I already have 2 times come here to ask the council to resolve problem, but today I try to remind again. I think that is the right place for me to come to ask a question, because in here have a 10 member of the council to consider any item or any transaction business. So in here, I want to take request a public hearing, because that's the right place for people to speak up. It is a public. So I have a message for a person who representative for the Bridgeview Apartment LLC, and who is a representative for the New Star Motel, and who is a representative for the Zimpoma, to come here to ask any question, say me, ask any question for the public to hear. Okay, so my question is, when defendant lose the case by default, and who have a right to take the money away, property of defendant without further warning from the court, as summon issue condition for default, who are the entitled to receive then defendant property when defendant involuntarily transfer your property. Civil case Lan Huang v. Bridgeview Apartment LLC, personal injury, court order entry default on 10/1/2006, request entry default filed on the 2/20/2006, Type 5 appeal have elapsed. Cây Hoàng v. Saberco and insurance company, court order entry default on 7/29/2008, request for entry default filed on July 31/2008, Type 4 appeal have elapsed. Doesn't officer Tapia, who have been protecting 3 people are doing business without business license for many years, is a misconduct, and city will be investigation and prosecute him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. That completes our public comment. Madam Clerk, we had items, we have 14 members present, items on the ordinance that we need 12 members. Can we take those up, please?
Yes, that's items 1 through 3. Would need a vote on reconsideration.
Colleagues, on 1, 2, 3, those are ordinances. Seeing no special on 1, 2, 3, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
The next ordinances, please.
And now a vote on the ordinances.
On the ordinances, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Very well. Next items, please.
Item 7 called special.
Number 7. Number 7, we have approximately 200 plus cards on number 7. There are 100 for and 100 against. So with that, Mr. Wesson, Mr. Alarcon. Mr. Wesson, you want to begin? Mr. Alarcon? Mr. Alarcon? You have the floor, sir. And before we begin, I think we need to congratulate Mr. Wesson on a accomplishment this morning. Mr. Wesson, you have an accomplishment this morning to announce.
This is my number 1 grandson. He has something to say. Young, you want to say something? You want to say hello? Hello. Hello, everybody.
Well, what's the good news?
Anyway, the only reason why I'm here today is because of... Okay. The only reason why I'm here today is to vote on this issue. I know that it's very important to you, and it's very important to people on both sides. The home property owners as well. The action today is just a vote to direct the city attorney's office to draw up an ordinance, I guess, and bring it back to us in 2 weeks. We had a 2-hour debate on this subject. No, you don't want to talk again. We had a 2-hour debate on this subject. I would like a very short debate today, because I've been up since 3:30, and about 8 minutes ago I had my second grandchild. I just had a granddaughter, and if the members or the people that are here if you want to afford me the opportunity to vote on this measure, if we could just have a 5-minute debate on both sides so that I can vote and go hold my grandmother. I have my priorities straight. So if that...
I wasn't going to have a public hearing.
Oh, if you were going to not have a public hearing, that's even better, because we're only voting on, I mean, the big thing will be 2 weeks from now if we get the 8 votes today. But anyway, I just wanted everybody to know the only reason why I'm here was to vote on this. So I actually missed the birth of my granddaughter en route to be here with you. Plus, as you can see, I'm stuck with babysitting duty, which is a pleasure. So if we could get going so I could register my vote, Mr. Alarcon, and go back to UCLA Medical Center.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Wesson. Mr. Alarcon, please.
Mr. Wesson, you never look better. Council members, you know that I proposed a moratorium of 1 year on rent increases relative to the rent stabilization ordinance. In 1979, when this ordinance was passed, it was tied in part to the Consumer Price Index. Every other rent stabilization ordinance that has been established to date in California is tied to the Consumer Price Index. For some curious reason, and even I haven't been around long enough to know why, the council provided a 3% floor that allows owners to impose a rent increase even when the CPI is less than 3%. I don't think that's right, but I'm not here to propose a change to that provision at this time. But I think it's something that, given the volatility of our economy over the last several years, we need to look at. The fact of the matter is that the Consumer Price Index is below zero, and it is in fact at 0.62%, and that if we had tied it to the Consumer Price Index purely, then we should be asking landlords for a decrease of 0.62% in their rent. And I can say that many good landlords are doing just that. Many of them are negotiating and renegotiating with their existing tenants. One of my own staff members received a rent offer that eliminated 1 month's rent. Good landlords get it. I'm not here to say that owners of properties are bad people. These are hard times, and all of us are suffering in our own different ways, landlords and owners included. But the fact is, with an unemployment rate of almost 13%, when you factor in the unemployment rate for renters, it's probably double. And when you consider that 630,000 units are protected under RSO, that's about almost 150,000 families that would be imposed with an increase in their rent, potentially, and with the lack of unemployment benefits being available because the extensions have run out. I fear that this $30 to $100 a month could have a severe impact on tens of thousands of families. Now, Councilmember Wesson recognized that we didn't have a lot of time on this issue, and he's asked that we shorten the moratorium to 4 months to give us an opportunity to look deeply into it. I've accepted that as a reasonable suggestion and have supported the committee report to that extent. Ultimately, I do believe we need a moratorium of 1 year because renters have suffered more than the owners. It's not saying that owners haven't suffered, it's simply saying that they've suffered more. I'm going to leave the debate open because I know that some questions will come up and I'll address them as they come up. But some of the things that owners are saying, for example, that their utility costs are going up and they can't cover this. Well, this motion does nothing to touch the 2% allowable pass-through for utility increases. So any any owners in that position will be able to pass through their utility increases, but frankly, most of the tenants are paying their own utilities. So I'm asking that we consider this 4-month plus 2-month extension to allow...
Quiet in the chambers. If you can't
to allow
conduct
us
yourself, we're going to have you removed.
To allow us to dig deeper, to study this subject further, and to come back with a hopefully more significant proposal in 4 to 6 months. I recognize how difficult this is for all of you to make a decision like this that does have very strong voices on both sides. But I think at your hearts you have to recognize that the 61% of the people of Los Angeles, 61% of the families that are living in rental situations deserve to not have an increase on their rent during these horrid economic times.
Colleagues, there's Mr. Koretz. Mr. Koretz, there's no one else on the queue other than you. Do we want to have a limited public hearing on this, or we want to debate it? Mr. Wesson? Okay, we've already had a public hearing on it. Mr. Koretz, go ahead, please.
Oh, I have a few questions, and I don't know how many of us are still struggling with this issue, but I have concerns on both ends of it because I know tenants are struggling, I know landlords are struggling, and I'm struggling to figure out exactly what the right thing is. First of all, a clarification question. Given energy increase costs, it's my understanding the committee agreed to allow pass-through of some energy-related costs, and with no committee report out, I'm not sure what this looks like. If someone could elaborate, Mr. Alarcon or Mr. Wesson.
Well, in fact, the utility pass-through is part of the rent stabilization ordinance. My motion does nothing to affect that.
Okay. Also, the rent stabilization ordinance study listed a number of fixes that needed to be done to our rent stabilization and affordable housing. Some are more landlord-friendly, some are more tenant-friendly. As a package, I think it's generally agreed that they would move us forward. How does it make sense to take this one component out of that, the rent freeze, and move it forward without going ahead with all the other fixes at the same time?
In my mind, in my mind, the approximately 1.5 million residents of Los Angeles who are faced with rent increases are suffering more than the few thousand landlords that, or owners, I should say, that are suffering but are suffering less. And well,
obviously, there's more tenants than there are landlords by nature, but I see and hear a lot of landlords struggling as well, and some that are trying to avoid losing their buildings. I think the folks that are actually didn't know there were that many landlords here, but particularly the mom and pop landlords. Is there anything we could look at to call some of them out from this overall effort, because that would have, I think, more of an impact upon the small ones than the rest. Obviously, the rest of them will be mad, but I'm not looking to make them happy. I'm just trying to do the closest thing to the right thing.
actually, that's why the chairman suggested a 4-month period of moratorium as opposed to a year, to give us a chance to look closer at the subject and come back with come back with a recommendation that is more inclusive of the greater recommendations of the report.
Would you consider amending this to exclude the mom and pops, the 1 to 4 unit buildings?
We did consider that in committee. It was offered by some of the public testimony, but the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of renters are in smaller units, and also many of the small units are owned by people who own many small units, and so it's not a true picture, and we would have to. That's one of the things that we would want to assess in this 4-month period.
And I know this is written as 4 months plus a possibility of an additional 2 months. My sense of how this place works is if you make it a potential 6 months, it'll get done in 6 months. If you limit it to 4 months, it'll get done in 4 months. Would you consider just limiting it to the 4 months? Okay.
We could have order, please, in the chambers. We do allow, just under protocol, hold on 1 second. Under protocol, we do allow folks to clap and to express themselves in a positive way. Please, if we can ask you to keep order during this debate. Otherwise, the negative expressions, we're going to ask you please not to have from the audience so we can maintain decorum.
Now, I realize you wanted the policy to be a year, but this is clearly looking at a temporary moratorium until we can actually get more current numbers and analysis. It's not intended to be the start of an ongoing moratorium unless it turns out to be warranted. I would certainly be more favorable to a purely 4-month moratorium so we can just push hard and make it happen and find out based on the information whether it makes sense to extend that or not. So at a minimum, I would make that motion that we make it a 4-month moratorium. I also know that Councilmember Hahn, I believe, has an amendment to make it, to exclude the mom and pops with 5 units or less. I would certainly be open to that as well.
Is that motion made then as well, or are you waiting for Ms. Hunt?
You need to second it before we can second it.
Oh, thank you.
If Ms. Hahn is making that motion, I would second it.
Okay. All right, we'll put that for 5 units, you said?
Yes, for 5 units.
All right, Ms. Hahn makes that, Mr. Kretz seconds.
The definition of
Mr. Parks is next.
Do you want to sign on it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues...
I'm sorry, Mr. Parks. On the first motion, Mr. Kretz's motion to just be 4 months, was there a second on that? Okay, Mr. Wesson seconded. Mr. Parks, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this whole study that we're waiting for the last 4 years came about from my motion to get the funding to go do the study. My concerns are that we shouldn't cherry pick that study until we get the entire study. The issue that I'm concerned about, and Richard, you're very eloquent this morning, and I almost got to the point of supporting until I realized that you raised the rates on the electrical for these same people last week. And so I think it's inconsistent that we worry about their prescription drugs and a variety of things today on their rent, but ignored those same kinds of concerns when their electrical bill went up 20% last week. I would like to make a motion that we not take pieces out of this study. We've been waiting for it for 4 years, that we have it go back to committee and bring us the entire study back so we can evaluate the rent stabilization ordinance in total, not pieces of it. The reason for the study was that we had added to the rent stabilization ordinance incrementally over time to where it began to get, it was conflicting and it made less and less sense as related to pass-throughs. It was a different formula for each one. And so the ordinance as it currently stands is over 20 years old and it's been amended over and over again. The study was to clarify and bring some sense to it. So my motion would be that we send it back, bring us the entire study, and let's deal with rent stabilization as a subject and enhance and change the ordinance that benefits both renters and landlords.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Parks, thank you. I second that motion. I think it's appropriate that we take that action. I think it's fair to all people. Instead of cherry-picking this matter, we do it fair. And I was up counting the cards. It's about balanced on both sides. So I understand the renter's point of view. I understand the owners of the property point of view. The fact of the matter is, if we're going to do something, let's do it as a consistent package and not just nickel and dime back and forth. So I support that motion. So I hope we can move forward with that, to send it back to committee to analyze this entire process and do it fair for the people of Los Angeles, both the renters and the owners.
Mr. Alarcon. Oh, sorry, Ms. Hahn. Ms. Hahn.
Yeah, thank you. And this is a very difficult subject. This is one I really am struggling on, I will tell you. I am probably 100% voting record on behalf of tenants' rights. I mean, I remember the fight we had here on the floor about the relocation fee. And I was one of those that supported the increase in relocation fees for tenants when they were asked to move. I've been a supporter of repealing the Ellis Act. Because I think that is really cutting out affordable housing units in Los Angeles. I began my career on the City Council sitting on the Housing Committee and worked really hard in my own district to try to provide affordable housing. I have a tough time with this, though. I know everybody's hurting. And I remember I went up against the airlines we increased the living wage for airport workers, even though the airlines said, well, hey, we're having a tough time. I said, well, the workers are probably having a more tough time. And I feel this today, but I feel like this is a bit unfair at this point to the landlords. I think this economy and what happened on Wall Street is unfair to all of us, frankly. And we're in this situation because of a bunch of greed on Wall Street. But I think many of our landlords have already sent out their notices that they actually could raise the rent 3%. And I feel like our actions on the City Council of late have been about increasing fees, increasing taxes, and putting more burden on landlords. So I have a couple of motions in today, colleagues, that would compensate the landlords if we do this. I'm looking at everything from excluding those who own, less than, 5 units, real mom and pops. I'm looking at maybe waiving some of these fees that we put on the landlords for inspections and other things. I even wanted to talk about exempting landlords from this recent DWP increase, but I think that would open up a whole new can of worms, and you probably wouldn't appreciate that, Ms. Perry. But I'm not comfortable voting for this unless we can also, in whatever we have under our jurisdiction, we can waive some of that for the landlords during this 4 months. We've got to do it in a fair way because landlords are people too. Landlords are having a tough time. And I do know that I've sat down with some landlords who also lost jobs. The husband's lost a job, the wife has lost a job, and this is their income as well. So why don't we try to do something that's fair on both sides? I'm all in favor of giving the tenants a break. They need a break. Many of them have lost their jobs. They're barely holding on. But I want us to, on the other side, if we can, let's balance it and waive whatever we have in our jurisdiction to waive on behalf of the landlord. So during this next 4 months, it's not an unfair burden on either one, and that I could support.
Thank you. Just to clarify, are those written ones that were coming, or do you want to clarify them orally? The 5 units which we had moved before, was that 5 units total or buildings of 5 units or less?
Where's the five or less? He's asking for clarification.
Yeah, Mr. Koretz said he'd second it.
It's been submitted.
Sorry? It's being submitted. Okay, we'll wait and we'll look at it then.
And then what about the fees?
Mr. Rosendahl.
Where are
It's being submitted. It's not yet before us.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I have staff come up, please, quickly? Staff, where's the staff on this? In the
housing department, or?
When staff comes up over here, in the meantime, how many are renters? Raise your hand. Okay, how many are landlords? Raise your hands. This is a democracy at its best. It's all in the room. Where's the staff to give me some backup? Come on, I want to ask you some questions, Mr. Guthrie.
First question I want to ask you is, historically, some cities have tied their rent increases to the CPA. The city of Los Angeles has left the floor at 3 and a high at 7. Do we know anything about that, and what impact does this law we have on this whole issue? Mr. Guthrie.
Thank you, Councilman.
Bring your mic up. There you go.
Yes, thank you, Councilman. My name is Doug Guthrie. I'm General Manager of the Los Angeles Housing Department. This is obviously a very difficult situation for both the tenants and the landlords, I think, as everyone has expressed here. We've been working our way through the rent, to get to your question just a second, we've been working our way through the extensive study that was done on this and are preparing to finish that process to address this in a comprehensive way. We understand we're not there yet and actions have to be taken. So it's hard for us to kind of take a specific position on the motion that's before the council right now. Your question, though, says what is going on in other communities?
Well, the CPA is what others have done, and of course our country and the world is in the greatest recession that any of us ever know. God knows when this market went down 1,000 points, up 400. It's crazy the way things are. Everybody's being hit up on all levels, be it the landlords, the mom and pop trying to make ends meet, renovate buildings to do it, or be it the tenants who just don't have the money to continue to pay for it. So how do we deal with it? Both are in trouble.
Anna, do you have the information on what's taking place in some other communities with regards to the CPI, I think is your question.
Good morning, Councilman. Most of the major jurisdictions...
Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Anna Ortega, Lally Housing Department. Most of the jurisdictions in the state of California that have rent stabilization do have formulas based on the CPI. In Los Angeles and Oakland, it's 100% of the CPI. In the other ones, it ranges from 60 to 75% of the CPI.
So we wouldn't be in this situation if we tied it to the CPI, because everything has gone down. That would have gone down too. Is that right?
Good morning, council members. Hakan Mordezai, Housing Department. Councilman Rosendahl, just want to clarify, Los Angeles also has tied its rent increase to the CPI, but what we have that's specifically different than the other jurisdictions is a floor and a ceiling. The floor being the 3, the ceiling being the 8. That's the distinction between our rent stabilization ordinance and that of places like Berkeley or West Hollywood or San Francisco.
Okay, so that's what brings us into the room today, right?
Yes.
Okay, because you have tenants on one hand who can't afford the increase, and you got landlords on the other side who have to do repairs, have to pay their taxes, have to pay the utility bills. So we're in a squeeze. Who do you support? Who do you don't support? Well, obviously, like Ms. Hahn, we want to support everybody, right?
Right.
So do you recommend a 4-month freeze while we go through this, or do you recommend sending it back to committee and let the 3% go forward, Mr. Guthrie?
Well, I'm not making a recommendation with regards to this motion. What I do say, though, is that there's been an enormous amount of effort that's been put forward with a comprehensive review of this ordinance. We haven't finished that process yet before the committee. We need to address this in a comprehensive way that is fair to both the tenants and to the landlords. And we're getting close to that point, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay, but since we're not quite there, what happens to a tenant that gets a notice that says it's gone up 3% and can't afford it?
And then if I can ask you to press your button again after that. Go ahead, please.
Well, as things stand right now, we need to implement the ordinance that's currently in place, and those increases take effect July 1st of this year in accordance with the ordinance, and notices have already begun to go out in accordance with the current ordinance. So that's really what we're required to do under the existing ordinance.
I appreciate it. I'm going to push my button again.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Alacon for a second time, Mr. Kretz, and Ms. Hahn.
Today's vote is just telling the city attorney's office to come back in 2 weeks. That's when we have the big debate. We do not have to have the big debate today. Some of the amendments, I think we could act on them, but this is we're asking them to come back and let us see how it would work. I can assure each and every one of you that this is, in my political life, I have never brought a mess before the body that I served with. A lot of that had to do to Charmette being my chief of staff, and she left me on my own on this one. So this is a bit of a mess. And I understand if you vote yes, I would say you've cast the right vote. If you vote no, I'd say you've cast the right vote. But today's vote is just to send it to the city attorney. And that's what we're requesting today. Well, no, we won't freeze it for 2 weeks it's going to be before the vote comes back. All we're doing is asking to have the paperwork drawn up. Then we have to vote on the actual paperwork. So today, we are just moving the process along. I have highest respect for the property owners and the tenants. I do not want to do anything that unfairly affects the property owners. Conversely, if we don't give the tenants some relief right now, they will be saddled with that increase for the year. So if we can get just the 4 months, it is not my plan or Mr. Reyes, who other than budget has the most active committee among us, has volunteered to work with me jointly with Plum and my committee. After 4 months, we won't just address this one issue. All of the concerns, we want to make sure that we deliver goods to the property owners as well. These 4 months is not just about an increase. It's about, Ms. Hahn, maybe eliminating some of those fees that they have to pay to have inspectors come back, and every time that's an additional $200. We need to do this, and that's why we asked for the 4 months plus 2, just in case. But I'm willing, Mr. Alarcon, to accept Mrs. Hahn's motion, Mr. Koretz, just so we can move this forward. I'm ready to accept that today. I think that the problem with sending it back to committee without directing the city attorney's office to put this together is we will, without a doubt, not make the deadline to provide some relief by July 1. So the vote right now is, can we direct the city attorney's office to do this? In 2 weeks, when they come back, then let us then argue, fuss, and fight over the bill. That's the American way. Today, we don't have to have that argument. Please allow me to, let's just vote. I want to go hold my granddaughter. I just really want to see her. So we can debate this for 2 hours today and debate it for another 2 hours in 2 weeks. That, we've got other things to do as well. Let's vote this thing up or down now. That's my recommendation. If you could wrap that up, Richard. If you could hit it out of the park.
I concur with Councilmember Wesson, particularly on the need for him to go hold his granddaughter. But I just want to say that we could. I have no problem with drilling down on the issue of mom and pops and how to address the particular concerns. True mom and pops, as you said, not corporate moguls who own many small units or who would invest in small units just to avoid this provision. I'm also willing to consider some of the things that Mr. Koretz said, but to do it right now would put the tenants in direct jeopardy of getting an increase. And remember, they're the ones that are going to pay the utility increase because we do have a pass-through provision, and 1% of the rent, not 1% of the utility bill. So they can pass that through to the tenants. They're faced with that already. They're faced with the 1% on the gas bill as well. And if the owner improves the property, they're faced with an increase there as well. So the tenants are faced with increases regardless of what we do on this matter. I just don't think in good conscience that we can impose a rent increase on a huge almost a majority of people in Los Angeles at this particular time when they're faced with all these other increases.
Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, first, my apologies, but I do want to ask our people one question, and then I'll be done. What's the history behind this? Why did we do a 3% floor and a 7% ceiling when other cities like West Hollywood, which I helped to write the rent control ordinance for, didn't have that provision? What was the thinking, and how would that have changed now?
Councilman, when the ordinance was adopted in 1979, at that time they had a fixed percentage of 7% all the time. And then they did, this is about the fourth major study of the ordinance. So when one was done in about 1984 and inflation was changing, at that time they decided to go to a CPI formula. And that's when they adopted the floor and the ceiling. I really can't answer why they put that 3% floor there, but I can tell you that we're the only jurisdiction that has that.
Has that worked well for the city, or has that been considered a problem?
It's worked all right, especially in years of high inflation, but more recently there have been several time periods when the actual inflation rate is under 3%, but we're required to round it up to 3% because of the rent stabilization ordinance. So there have been maybe 6 or so years in which the actual percentage was a little bit less.
Thank you. And I'll just make a point. I mean, for those of you who've known me for a long time, you know I helped to found the city of West Hollywood and write one of the strictest rent controls in the country. But I think this is a different circumstance because we're going through the closest thing to the Great Depression that we'll ever see. And while it's hit tenants hard, I recognize it's also hit landlords hard. So I've suggested a couple compromises. Politically stupid for me because ideally you come down on one side or the other and you get one side to like you and one side not. Instead, I have no doubt I've ticked off both sides and I'm going to do that. But with these couple compromises, I'm willing to support this measure.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I'm hoping, colleagues, that the two amendments that I've submitted, one is to look at exempting the mom and pops, the true mom and pops. The other one, I think, and I'm glad you said that, Councilmember Rustin, about what exactly we're doing today. And by the way, congratulations on your new granddaughter born this morning. Congratulations. So if this does come back in 2 weeks, what I want, though, so that I can support it in 2 weeks, is this idea of exempting the true mom and pops. And I also want to look at the fees that landlords have to pay, and I've asked for the feasibility of waiving those fees, and that's everything from, you know, the SCEP fee, there's a registration fee for every tenant. I mean, there's a lot of fees that landlords pay. So in these 4 months, and I don't know when they pay them, by the way, I guess that's my question. Do they pay them on July 1st? Do they pay them on January 1st? Do they pay them at different times? It'll take a lot of accounting, but I think it's important. And I'd like to see them being subsidized maybe through our Housing Trust Fund. I think this is a perfect use of that money to help subsidize the waiving of these fees for our landlords. So as we go through these 4 months, we're not unfairly unburdening our landlords while we're giving a huge needed relief to the tenants.
Mr. Zine.
So those two amendments I'd like to see approved, and then I can support voting to send it to the city attorney.
In respect to Mr. Weston and his pressing family needs, I'm calling the question.
Well, there's nobody left on the queue, so I think it is unanimously accepted unless there's an objection. That means calling the question just means the vote, the debate ends, and nobody from council can speak anymore. So we have, I believe, 4 motions, Madam Clerk. Let me see if I have these right. We have Ms. Hahn's A and B. We have Mr. Parks's motion to send to committee and Mr. Koretz's motion to make it just 4 months. Is that right? Okay.
That's correct.
And the order, I think, would be B, A, Parks, Koretz. Is that the reverse order of when they were accepted? Okay. All right, so colleagues, the first vote we would take is on 7B. This one is specifically on the mom and pop unit exemption of 5 units or less. Okay? Yes vote is to exempt, no vote is to make it apply to them as well. Please open the roll. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes, 4 noes.
Okay, that passes. 7A is next, which is a report back on fees that landlords pay. Please open the roll. 7A, fees on it's a study back on fees that landlords pay. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes, 1 no.
Okay. Next, we have Mr. Parks' motion to send to committee. This matter. Please open the roll to send to committee. Mr. Parks' motion to send this to committee for further study. Please open the roll. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
6 ayes, 8 noes.
Okay, that is defeated. Next one is now as Mr. Koretz's, just to make it 4 months only. Please open the roll. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
6 ayes, 8 noes.
Okay, that fails. So now we have before us, as amended, with the exemption of the mom and pop units. The report back went forward, but the exemption with the mom and pop units to instruct the city attorney to come back with an ordinance. It's not a final vote on an ordinance, as Mr. Wesson pointed out, to have 4 months with a possibility of 2 months extension on the rent increase moratorium. Okay? Please open the roll. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
9 ayes, 5 noes.
Okay? That will be back in 2 weeks, so that is not approved yet. It is then an ordinance that will be considered by us in 2 weeks' time. So we will see everyone then. If we can send that forthwith without objection. Mr. Kretz?
Mr. President, could I amend my vote as a no?
Mr. Kretz, yes, would change that to a no vote. Would that affect the outcome? Okay. Or that could be, do you want a full reconsideration, Mr. Kretz? Or do you want to just change the vote? Okay. All right. Next item, please.
Item 4, called special for cards.
Item 4 is next before us. Arnold Sachs on item 4. We'll just take Mr. Sachs, we'll wait 2 minutes while we're clearing the chambers out. Thank you. If I can ask us to please, if I can ask folks to please clear the center aisle, Mr. Parks, if we can take some of those conversations to the side or outside, please. And if I can ask folks very respectfully to please keep their conversations to a minimum until they're out the doors. We now have item number 4 before us, colleagues. We have one public speaker card that is called the special. Mr. Sachs, if you'd like to come forward now on item 4.
Thank you again.
If I can have order in chambers, and please, if folks can keep their conversations to a minimum until they leave. Mr. Labange? Hold on one second, Mr. Labange. Your microphone's not on.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as we pick up the next item here, we have some very special guests from Okinawa who are witnessing our action today. Mr. Higa, if I could ask, and also Mr. Shimabuko, and also could I ask Mr. Arakawa and guests, please give them a big welcome to Los Angeles. Welcome from Okinawa. Arigato.
Thank you very much.
As you know, Nagoya is our sister city, and it's our oldest sister city over 50 years. Nagoya, Japan.
Thank you. They're from Okinawa.
They're from Okinawa.
This group is from Okinawa, not from Nagoya. He was just pointing out.
I love Nagoya.
But they're not from there.
Okay.
Don't worry. Mr. Sachs, come on forward.
Thanks to you.
I'm not from Nagoya either. Yes, thank you. Since you just had an item on your agenda regarding language and the use of language in rent control and the such, I look at this and I say, well, what about the language here? You're executing a disposition and development agreement with the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority for property located at 8224 South Broadway for a transitional housing facility for homeless families. Transfer Part A of this, Section 3, Part A says, execute a DDA with the LAHSA to transfer the property at no cost and record a covenant and agreement restricting use of the property as transitional for formerly homeless families for 55 years. So who are you transferring the property to? This is related to, this has got CRA written in it, and Part 2 of it. And anything we know with CRA, well, sewage smells sweeter than CRA. But again, who is getting the transition? Who's the transfer being created with? It just says a disposition and development agreement. With who? With the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. And who? It just says with property. And who? Again, you talk about language in your rent control ordinances. You talk about language that you don't understand in your utility rate increases. And again, languages that leave so much to be desired in a housing ordinance. But with what party is what party is involved here? CRA. We know this is a loser.
Mr. Sachs, if you are interested in who there is the report, it's available for the public, and that's always available online ahead of time and also in person. So feel free on any of those. Those are just short agenda titles, and if you'd like any of the details, who's involved, all that, that is made absolutely abundantly clear for the public. And if you'd like to read it right now, I'm sure our CLA would be happy to get it for you, okay?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. That will close our public comment on this item. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Item 11, called special for Councilmember Rosendahl.
Mr. Rosendahl, item 11.
Yeah, we need staff to come in and give us a quick, put it on the desk until that staff shows up.
Okay, you want to hold that on the desk? Okay. Let me know when your staff has located the staff for that. Let's go to the next item. Please.
Item 12, called special for cards.
Yeah, item 12 is next. Arnold Sachs, if you'd like to come forward on item 12, please.
Actually, sir, yes. Item 12, I was going to question, since you have this program and you are looking at a rent escrow or a rent stabilization, I was wondering how the rent stabilization might affect your REAP program. Is there any fallout with the REAP program? Has there been any background study done with the REAP program? Just questions to look at, because we know all too often that while you're charging from behind, the people are suffering in the streets. So, again, will any of your discussion regarding this rent stabilization moratorium be directed at looking at what the rent escrow account program fallout will be? Because for the same reasons you decided, or you talked about not increasing because of the problems faced by landlords, will that affect the same landlords that are in the renting escrow?
I'll close our public comment on this item. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Mr. Rosendahl, do we have staff on 11 yet, or not sure? Okay.
So just put it on consent and let's just go.
All right, let's take up 11 then. Let's go ahead and prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item called special, please.
Item 19, called special for cards.
Dr. Williams, if you'd like to come forward on item number 19, will be followed by Mr. Sachs.
Item 19, Lopez Canyon, the landfill. Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA. The North Valley Reporter has had several articles regarding the Lopez Canyon landfill. This reallocation of money from the Lopez landfill to the police department? Why? They have a lot of money in their budget for next year, so why the overtime? Why the overtime in salaries from the Lopez Canyon landfill, which needs to be finally closed and needs the money for landscaping and to kind of compensate for the people who have experienced the landfill for the last 20 years and, do it right. Make it a beautiful resource for our community. But putting the money to salaries rather than to landscaping on Lopez Canyon, I think it's wrong. I would recommend against approving it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Arnold Sachs next.
Yes, thank you again. This transfer funding, I'm just curious, are there other special amenity groups within the community of Los Angeles? Is there a special group of funding for the harbor that doesn't go to the Harbor Commission? Is there one for that can be used in Westchester and that can be, not Westchester, in San Pedro and Harbor Gateway? How about the airport that can be used in Westchester? How about around Dodger Stadium that can be used in Echo Park? How about around Staples Center that can be used in that area? Are there special fees that are accumulated and not used for the Figueroa corridor and for the, because the city is paying for that, we just heard, but these special funds to be used for police. We can't get LA Live to pony up for the police services for the Michael Jackson funeral, but we can get the Lopez Canyon to pay overtime fees for the police department. There's some kind of disconnect there. It just doesn't make sense. I appreciate the fact that they have the money. But what about the public? You're always touting public safety, public safety, public safety, but you're never finding a way when you had the money to pay for it, it disappears. When you raise the garbage fees to get to 10,000 police, you reach the number, and it disappeared. Now you're happy to have 9,960. What happened to the other 34? You had 10,000. You're hiring to attrition. Where's the money go? Well, we get money from the Lopez Canyon landfill. What is that they say? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Lopez Canyon landfill, city council. Weigh the difference.
That'll close our public comment on this item. We can please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Would council like to recess the regular meeting and go into the special meeting?
Yes, please. Let's go ahead and recess the regular, and please call the roll for the special meeting.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Weezer, Koretz, Krikoyan, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, Zine. 12 members present and quorum, Mr. President.
All right. First order of business.
Item 20 is an item for which public hearing has been held.
Okay. Anybody wishing to call 20 special? Item number 20, colleagues? If not, let's go ahead and prepare the roll. I think this was supposed to be a presentation, Mr. Parks, on item 20.
On number 20, the CAO has a presentation that we requested from the Budget and Finance Committee. Thank you, colleagues. Just to set this up, many of you are aware of an article that was written recently, I believe the Wall Street Journal, that talked about our financial issues. Miguel had taken the time to go on a point-by-point evaluation of that article, and we thought from the committee it would be important to not only advise you of what their research determined, but also the general public, so they know exactly what the financial conditions of the city. And so let me ask Miguel if you could go through that and highlight the issues of most concern.
Good morning. I welcome this opportunity to sort of clarify some facts related to the op-ed piece by former Mayor Reardon. We have been receiving a number of calls from our investors and from some of the bond rating agencies after they read it in the Wall Street Journal. And in fact, many of them identified specific issues that was inconsistent with what we had shared with them prior on the state of the city finances, so that asked us for this clarification. So we'll be happy to do that. First, let me say that we certainly welcome the former mayor's raising of pension reform. That's something that we've argued that your council has discussed extensively and provided us direction. I know the mayor feels, as you do, that there has to be a reform of our pension system. Within that context, though, it's important that we work within the context of the facts, and I want to walk through some of those. The first issue is related to the issue of bankruptcy. The op-ed piece talks about bankruptcy as an option, as a way of getting out of some of our agreements to be able to engage in pension reform and other reform in our structure. Let me just say that I don't believe that bankruptcy is either a political strategy or a labor strategy. Bankruptcy is what you do when you have no other options, when you're basically in a situation where you've done everything else that you can to reduce expenditures to be in line with your revenue projections. And clearly, this last year has demonstrated that your council has done a significant amount of work to reduce the size of city government. And it's been painful. We've eliminated departments. We've had to lay off over 100 individuals. The mayor's proposed budget further reduces the size of government in a very significant way. And so we are on our way to financial stability. And so bankruptcy is further away now than it was possibly a year ago. In addition, his projections identify a larger pension contribution of $2.5 billion for the next 4 years. Our general fund contribution for our pension system is actually expected to be $556 million higher in the next 4 years. So that number is inaccurate. We also want to clarify that there were some assumptions related to how the pension funds are operated in terms of the kind of assumptions that they expect in terms of their overall investments. As you well know, the charter clearly states that our pension funds are operated by independent boards. Your city council, the mayor, is not in a place where it could dictate how they engage in their strategies, both in terms of their assumptions for how much they're expected to earn, as well as how they spread out their costs. There was a discussion about the size of the workforce, and there was a recommendation that the workforce should be significantly reduced. It's important to point out, at least as proposed by the mayor's budget, the workforce will be at the lowest point it has been in the last 12 years. It would go down from it would basically be below 32,000 employees. It's a 9% reduction of where it was in 2005, which is the target date that the mayor proposes we be at. At the same time, during the Rear administration, the workforce was increased by over 8.5%. There's a few other things that I won't go into much detail. I'll be happy to respond to some questions that you may have. I do want to spend some time to sort of also highlight the larger issue of pension reform, and we've prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation because, as I indicated, pensions are an issue that need to be addressed, and as your council has been debating and we've been discussing with our various bargaining units, if we could have, is it going to go up on the screen? Okay. You should each have a copy of this PowerPoint. Hopefully it helps clarify some issues. The first point demonstrates what our deficit looks like for the next few years. This is again assuming that the mayor's budget is a starting point. Originally, in January, we had talked about a deficit that was going to reach well over $1 billion in the years 14-15. If the mayor's budget gets approved, or somewhere in that neighborhood, it gets significantly reduced, and it gets reduced in half. That means we continue to have a deficit to contend with in the future, but we made major progress to address it. Beyond that, the biggest contributors to that deficit, though, are our pension systems, both in LACERs and our sworn pensions, as well as our health and benefits. Those are the areas that are growing at a higher pace than our revenue streams. And it's those areas that we're facing the largest impact on the deficit that we're facing. And the next slide demonstrates how that growth actually occurs. The following slide talks about where the growth that we've taken in our pension system, it's gone up from, in the last 10 years, 2001, from $206 million to our overall general fund contribution expected for the next fiscal year at well over $800 million, which is 18% of the general fund. Back 10 years ago, it was 7% of the general fund. This particular growth has occurred in the areas of our sworn pensions, and one of the contributors to that has been the change in the add-on of additional tier during the last year of the Reardon administration that basically allowed folks to retire earlier and to receive a larger percentage of their salary upon retirement. And so it's this additional tier that has been one of the contributors to the increase in our pension system. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. LaBonge.
What would you say? I mean, in good times, we try to do good things. And in that period, which you just mentioned, when they enhance it, I think the drive was, and Mr. Reardon was extremely committed to public safety and trying to achieve higher numbers, was to try to be competitive in the market of public safety to try to get the best pension available for that. All that being said, it's a different world in 2010 than it was in the 90s and how we look at things. What, as the city administrative officer, are you going to do in the sense of these months ahead that you could come together with us on some options we can look at to try to strengthen our ability to the fiscal aspect of our city, but at the same time to make sure that we have the proper benefits for the people workforce. We're living longer. I mean, it's hard to believe in 1974 I started with the city of Los Angeles at $3.54 an hour, and now all these years later, okay, now here's where we are, but it's not the same. what are you as an administrator? What's our plan to come back with some items? We are living longer. There's needs to look at some changes. What's your projection?
Well, there's a number of areas we could start looking at, and your council has provided me some direction on that. The issue of age is something that I think you appropriately raise. People are living longer, and our pension system should reflect that, should be in alignment with that growth in people's age. Obviously, when an actuary does their study, they look at how long the life expectancy is expected to be of the population that's in retirement. And if we lower the terms in which people could retire, that obviously increases our costs. Concurrently, if we increase the age in which people could retire, that helps reduce that period of time that they're in retirement, and particularly since people are living longer. The second area is that we should consider is the area of retiree health. If you're a retired employee, you don't pay any portion of your health care benefits, and I think that would be something that's very unusual in the private sector to occur, and that may be an area we may want to consider. Specifically to sworn, we may want to look at what Tier 4 used to look like and try to come up with a model that fits those strong elements of that plan that some of our sworn personnel continue to be in, and sit down with our bargaining units to find some common ground around that. So we do have various options. It's not an easy thing to do. Obviously, pensions are very important for our bargaining units, as they should be, as they are to us. But the goal here is to come up with the long-term sustainability of the city. And I think the one part in which I wholeheartedly agree with former Mayor Reardon is that pensions, the reform of our pensions is critical to any solution to bring us to long-term sustainability. And without that, we'll continue to sort of struggle each year, particularly in future years, to move forward. It's not necessarily a panacea for today, because we're limited to how we could reform it for existing employees, but it is for a time for 10 to 15 years from now.
Yeah, and if I just wanted to say, too, I have no animosity. I love Richard Reardon, and I think it's good that those who have served, I would love Tom Bradley's counsel today. I would love John Ferraro's counsel today. Anyone who's been here before, I would love their counsel. Judge Hahn, I'd love his counsel. But as we go forward, we probably absolutely need to group and come up with a menu that is fair to the people who work for Los Angeles and fair for the people who we serve in Los Angeles as we continue to manage this great city. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes.
When we look at the environment that's being created by articles that were written by Mr. Reardon, and I try to understand how does that help us. There's a lot of different answers that you'll get, but I've been told, given the experience of other bankruptcies, that it's very expensive to go bankrupt, that there'd be large sums of money that would be doled out to all the different debtors, and depending how the judges and the courts respond to that moment. When we look at our options, bankruptcy is very expensive. Would you agree with that statement, and are there any observations that you can make in that regard? Because the folks who have the capacity to absorb that kind of money, the folks we're indebted to, are usually within those circles of influence within the financial world. But I wanted to get really straight, or as best as you can, give us a perspective on how expensive it is to go bankrupt.
Well, it's expensive in a number of ways. I think if you look at Orange County, when they went bankrupt in the 90s, I think at the end of the day they ended up paying a couple $100 million worth of activity, from legal fees to the restructuring of their government, just to contend with the bankruptcy portion of their overall solution. And so those are dollars that obviously take away from direct services that our community relies on. The second piece is that it makes it more expensive to borrow money. Obviously, a city that is bankrupt and has difficulty convincing the investors to invest in our city, in order for them to take that risk, they would want to see a higher interest rate. And so we borrow money even in the best years because of our cash flow. And so we borrow, we'll start the year borrowing over $1 billion and oftentimes to be able to have enough money to get through the first year before we start receiving some of our revenue that's projected. And so obviously if we file for bankruptcy, it impacts our credit rating, which then results in a higher interest rate. And so when you borrow that much money, that is a significant amount of dollars that gets taken away from our ability to provide services and simply goes to investors. But I think the most expensive is really sort of the human impact it has. We basically are abandoning our authority, and you as elected officials in particular, to best serve the constituents that you're here to represent, and you're abandoning it to a third party to basically set priorities, to establish, identify where cuts should be made, to decide whether the decisions that you've made in terms of funding certain recreational programs or funding to the array of services that we currently have should be part of the city's menu of things that we provide. And I think that ultimately has an impact on the quality of life of Angelenos, and as well as the brand that the city of Los Angeles would then be under bankruptcy. It becomes questionable whether we become a place where businesses want to invest in, want to place their growth in, and so for a number of those reasons, there's a number of different reasons why not to explore it.
So the very sector that just recently received billions of dollars of bailout from the federal government will get more money out of this city in that process, because they are the very same instruments that would be acting upon that bankruptcy process, which runs within those circles that are influenced by folks like Mr. Reardon, who has that capacity to engage at that level of finance. So again, I look at Joe Citizen, the constituent we serve on a day-to-day basis, the majority of the makeup of the city, and those would suffer the most in that scenario. And I just think we need to bring that into light of day and understand the environments that created that really is not healthy for us. We continue to go down that road, and it's just a shame that we have to continue fighting. We're down now. I feel like we're being kicked, and it's not necessary. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very intriguing discussion here. I come from the private sector. I joined this government at age 60. I'll be candid with you. We never had the pensions or health care plans that government workers have. Never. In fact, I fought for years to finally get a 401k in the corporation I was in with 17,000. I fought for it because workers were getting nothing. Okay? My phones have been ringing off the hook this morning from constituents saying, go bankrupt. That's how you can bust those pension plans. That's how you can bust those health care plans. Well, if that's what the strategy of going bankrupt is, the side on the other side are all the other issues you pointed out. But I have, since I've been on this floor, talked about pension reform and health care reform since day one. Because obviously, from my perspective, you can't just take care of government workers at the expense of services in the constituent. But it isn't the government's fault, it's the economics of what's happened in the last period of time. So as my phones ring off the hook this morning, what do I tell my constituents about this discussion in the simplest of terms?
I would recommend you tell them that they're absolutely right, that pension reform is necessary, and that you support, your past votes have indicated you support pension reform, and certainly your record demonstrates that. But it has to be done in the context of balance, and bankruptcy is not a solution to getting there. It doesn't guarantee a reform of our pension system. It doesn't guarantee that our contracts will be reopened necessarily. And so it's not the panacea. The reality is that the only way out of the situation is to very difficult, hard work and tough choices. There's no easy way out. Bankruptcy is not an easy way out. Folding to one side or the other, it means going through our budget, making very tough choices, making cuts that are very painful, but finding a mechanism to live within our means. And your council and the mayor have worked very hard these last year to get there, and I'm confident that we'll continue to do that.
Okay, in that confidence you got there, can we set up a second tier going forward that every new employee that comes into the city over time does not get the same package that the existing employees get on health care and pensions?
Yes, we can, and our system already has that. In particular, for sworn personnel, there are multiple tiers for sworn personnel, and I think one of the options that certainly your council has directed me to further explore with our unions and negotiate is the establishment of another tier for future employees.
Can we do anything about present employees? Anything that would affect the present packages that the 30-something thousand have and the 15,000 retirees?
We're really limited by state law in that regard. Your pension is your vested right. It's something that you own, and the law basically requires us that for every amount that we request from our unions to contribute more for their existing pension, we are obligated to provide them the like benefit. So at the end of the day, it becomes a wash in terms of any financial
Okay,
gain.
what about the health care, which we do have some control over?
We do
I
have-
understand, like, it's 1% for us, 20% for the private sector. I mean, a dramatic shift on that. What can we do on that?
In the area of healthcare, we have a tremendous amount of ability to make changes, and that's another area that we're working hard to try to negotiate with our bargaining units, so that there's a greater fairness in sharing the increasing cost of our healthcare system. The reality is our healthcare costs have doubled in the last 10 years. They go up virtually 10% each year, and we end up as the employer bearing 100% of that increase.
Any sense of the Obamacare business, of what comes out of Washington and its impact on us here in terms of health care?
And then if I can ask you to press your button again after that.
Thank you.
In some ways, we're looking at that now. We may not end up a winner as a result of the health care plan, and it may result in additional costs to the city, actually.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Parks.
I know.
Bernard Pieper.
So we'll speak fast. Miguel, thank you for the chart. I think this is something you gave us early on, and I think, colleagues, the most important one is that first one that shows the gap. And I also ask, as we're going through the Budget Committee, that just as this article came out, there's going to be a number of things that may be information that could be misinterpreted. And I would just ask that you stay closely in touch with the CAO's office, because they've been directed by the committee to go out and research every aspect of people's, whether it's unions or non-unions, what their issues are. Today we gave you a copy of a document that the CAO has responded to line by line that deals with the coalition unions' budget proposals. And so we'd ask that you review that, because certainly it will be discussed in future budget meetings.
Thank you. We do have a few cards on this. Dr. Clyde Williams, if you'd like to come forward. Then Arnold Sachs. And then Dr. Wiseman and Van Nuys will be third.
Thank you very much, CAO. We need a lot more of these for everybody, especially so that maybe the handouts that they had would be online. I don't know. I would hope so, because we're trying to explain it to our neighborhood council stakeholders, and it is impossible to, in some ways, understand. It's almost as bad as the DWP and or the CRA as far as getting real figures as to what the city employees' pensions will be in 5 years, 10 years. I always like 2020. So we'd like to see it increased as far as his participation. Regarding pensions, we're very concerned regarding the AB 155 and how it influences the potential bankruptcies. So maybe even if we declared bankruptcy, we wouldn't be able to negotiate out the pension plans. So it all goes back as to how can we trust the figures, the integrity of the CAO, the council, the departments that you try to manage. I don't know how you do it. So the controller has also talked about bankruptcy. The CAO in January mentioned the word 4 times in his presentation, and we always remember those things. So we're quite concerned regarding the numbers and the accessibility of these numbers and our ability to translate them so that our members in our neighborhood councils can really understand them. We spent yesterday afternoon in the budget advocates group upstairs trying to figure out, what the numbers are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sachs?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. Here I am thinking you were going to discuss the article in the Wall Street Journal, and it turns out you were going to discuss the recent article in the Wall Street Journal, not the article from April 9th, when they talked about insolvency and bankruptcy after the mayor, Mayor Villaraigosa, by the way, mentioned it in discussing the fact that if DWP doesn't give us, if they don't get their rate increase, the city might be looking at bankruptcy. And that was written about in the Wall Street Journal, and nobody discussed it. But I brought it up here because you had people going to Washington asking for money. And the bond rating that would be affected by the mayor announcing the possibility of facing bankruptcy, although not on his watch. He'll leave it for the next mayor. So why didn't you not discuss the Wall Street Journal article from April 9th, 2010? Why wait? Everybody's entitled to an opinion. You have opinions, I have opinions. You don't listen on this side anyway. So the Mayor Reardon would have an opinion? That's like listening to Tim Lewicki's opinion. Or the guy who did the development in Playa Vista, his opinion. They all put their pants on one leg at a time. So again, why not the original Wall Street Journal article where the sitting mayor discussed bankruptcy? What numbers you have to play around with that? I really don't have the time to show you my answer, but suffice to say, we'll talk about it Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. And Van Nuys, Dr. Wiseman?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd almost closed up my shop because I thought you were not going to take public comment. I'm very pleased that you do.
Happy to do so.
Thank you. Dr. Williams has just told you about this meeting we had yesterday of the budget advocates. The budget problems are so widespread. There are so many topics. We only had time to go through just a few of them. And we were handed Mr. Santana's response to the Villaraigosa and Rubalcaba article. And I think it's important to know that both of those people wrote that article. I could go through it one piece at a time, but one of the things that's been in today's news has been a retort from Mr. Santana that Mr. Reardon was at least partly responsible for it. He mentioned one way in his increase in police that occurred during his watch. The other thing that occurred during his watch was the onset of the Tran. And you've heard me speak of the Tran before. I will speak of it again until you start speaking of it. The Tran is a technique used in business called hedging. And we hedge our bets. in the first 6 months of our year and take a big loan out, just like a farmer who plants corn and hopes to sell his corn at a profit at the end of the season. And we take a big loan out, and that loan began with Mr. Reardon. And if Mr. Reardon is responsible for our problems, then you, the subsequent mayors and the subsequent council members, are equally responsible. Our whole fiscal circumstance has not been addressed well, and one of the issues we brought up yesterday afternoon was how disappointed we were, and a formal motion had been made at several of our public meetings, and how disappointed we were with the Budget and Finance Committee not addressing these very large issues and focusing more on the departments. I think we need to look at the broad issues again, and
Thank you, Dr.
volunteered.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wiseman. Appreciate your comments. That will, sorry, Mr. Labange?
I'm going to ask the CAO one more question. Just a thought as I heard our discussion, would it make sense, because medical cost is a giant cost, would it make sense, and if you could look at this, other municipalities, counties, and others, what if there was some partnership with someone like a city-county clinic? Let's say we got involved with a county retirement, I'm talking for the future city retirement, where there would be, like Kaiser. Kaiser was developed by the workers at Kaiser Steel, but a smaller one that would be an entry medical facility, so try to reduce the cost. We used to have a city hospital on 6th Street at 1401 West 6th, up until, I don't know what Personnel, does Personnel still have a hospital at all? No. We got rid of it when they got rid of that. Just something to think about. If it would be, at least far as an entry form, to probably lower the cost if we ran something, because medical costs are going to be so high. I wanted to put that on your thought process.
Well, I know the county explored that to try to have its own employees utilize a county network of county hospitals and clinics as an option,
right,
instead of going to Kaiser or some of these others, and they weren't very successful in convincing the bargaining unit to do that, but we could certainly explore.
Well, I think to look at something as we look to the future, because it's a changed dynamic.
That's right.
It's a changed world now. We'd like to, and I again appreciate Mayor Reardon's thoughts, but certainly we could all say from a financial markets and institutions, the 90s are much different than right now, 2010. And as we project, how do we keep us going forward in a way that we can still serve the people as well as we do, but also serve our employees with the needs that they may have, and our retirees. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. CAO.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and note and file that without objection. Go through the next items, please.
Items 21 through 27 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration. Reports have been submitted and distributed on items 21 through 26, and there are cards on items 23 and 24.
Okay, we'll call 23 and 24 special for cards from the public. Any other special items, colleagues? There's no objection to considering those. Those are before us. Let's take up the balance, 21, 22, 25, and 26. Please open the roll. Close the roll. And tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
And 27 is an item for public hearing has not been held. Let's go ahead. There's no cards on that. We'll close the public hearing. Let's prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
I'm sorry, so 23 and 24 did have public hearings?
No, they did not. There was no quorum.
Okay, so Dr. Clyde Williams on item 23.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA, also Sierra Club Water Committee member. Pave it and paint it green. In this case, we're going to panel it and say it's green. Why are we doing this to the Owens Valley? I've worked there quite a few times. Know the water issues. Happy to see some of the water back in the river. However, is it anywhere comparable to what was there before LA Department of Water took it over? I don't think so. Now we're proposing to put panels out over it. Well, in order to have panels, you got to have roads. In order to have panels, you got to have cable. You got to have a whole bunch of things that will affect 30,000 acres of land in the Owens Valley. So, you put panels on it and it reduces the wind over the dust-laden flats. Why are the flats dusty? Because all the water's gone. We've taken it all. So why don't we put 30,000 acres of panels on top of the 800,000 buildings that we have in the city of LA, or cover some of our areas rather than having to go to Owens Valley and further abuse the place that we have abused for almost 100 years. So I'd highly recommend that you go back and have them revisit this contract, and that you go back to the water side of it rather than the panel side of it. Paneling it and calling it green does not help the Owens Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's prepare the roll on 23 and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
As approved. Item 24, Mr. Sachs.
Thank you again, Arnold Sachs. My question or my comment regarding this item is for the as-needed professional and technical services in the areas of engineering and architectural design. What about professional and technical services in the other areas that the DWP encompass? What about professional and technical services in leadership? What about professional and technical services in quality control? What about professional and technical services in creating a program for the greening of LA that can be looked at in a viable manner? What about professional and technical services for the workers so that when they visit a strip club, they know what they're looking at? What about professional and technical services throughout the DWP department? What about professional and technical services throughout the other proprietary departments? Is there a checklist, a program that is available for the public to look at so they can measure the services that they're getting? What about a professional and technical services list for the city council? You voted on a rate increase, yet a good portion of you didn't know, again, what the standard of the rate increase was. Was that professional or technical? I don't know. Maybe it was both. So start there and then set the table. Thank you.
We'll close our public comment on that item. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
That is approved. If we can recess, if we can adjourn the special meeting and back to the regular meeting.
Council
Order of business.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those are posted and referred.
There are excuses on the desk. Councilmember Zine requests to be excused August 10th, 11th, and 13th for personal business. That meets council policy.
He is excused.
Councilmember Koretz wishes to be excused on August 13th for city business. That meets council policy.
He is excused.
Councilmember Perry wishes to be excused on June 9th all day, June 22nd to leave early at 12:30, June 29th to leave at 11, July 6th to arrive at 11, July 13th to leave at noon or at 11 and return at 12:30. That meets council policy. That is for June 9th and July 7th or July 6th. That is for personal business. The remaining are for city business.
Okay, she's excused.
And that clears the desk.
All right, do we have any announcements, colleagues? Any announcements? Mr. Labange?
Yeah, members, tomorrow throughout the city, the Los Angeles City Fire Department will have open house It started in 1958 by the Los Angeles City Fire Department, encouraging people to visit their local firehouses between 10 and 4. At a variety of locations throughout the city, there will be special events, including the Historic Fire Museum in Hollywood at Station 27 at Cahuenga, just south of Sunset, a pancake breakfast. Also in the San Fernando Valley on Vineland, Station 86, we'll have a great pancake breakfast sponsored by the Toluca Lake Chamber of Commerce and Neighborhood Council, as well as others. We encourage everyone to visit their local fire station to meet their firefighters. Additionally, tomorrow is National Train Day in the country, where we salute Amtrak, and there'll be events at Union Station. Welcome everyone who want to visit Union Station tomorrow for National Train Day.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is for Mr. Koretz's folks and my folks and everybody else that uses the most busiest street intersection in America. It's the 405, the 10, and the 101. Starting tonight at 9 o'clock, the Sunset Bridge that goes across the 405 will start the process of the widening, which means K-rails will be going in, and by Monday it'll be operable again. But this will go on for 3.5 years. $1 billion. This is a state project with MTA involved and DOT involved. It's a big deal. A lot of public outreach has happened, but not enough. Some of the local television stations are now trying to cover it. What people need to know is that the Sunset Bridge, the Skirble Bridge, and the Mulholland Bridge, all three will start construction, but the very first one starts tonight at 9 o'clock. The key word for everyone is patience. Patience, patience. It's going to be going on for a few years until it's done. When it's done, the 405 will have another carpool lane so that the traffic can flow better. All of those bridges will have larger on-ramps and off-ramps that make it easier to get on. But I would be a complete fool if I didn't say it will be problematic in the short run. People need to know that, and they need to be patient. Mr. Koretz and I, with Mr. Zev Yaroslavsky, with Mike Fuhr, and others, are coordinating from our end to let the messages get to the community. But it is a Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger statewide Caltrans project with MTA and DOT and $1 billion in play. I apologize for anyone who's going to be inconvenienced, but this is what has to happen as we fix the 405 and widen it. So be patient and know that when it's done, we'll be in better shape than we are right now. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, so if they're stuck in traffic, they should just patiently call
Starting
you, right?
tonight at 9 o'clock.
Got you. Thank you. Mr. Parks?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to advise the public that, particularly in light of all of the foreclosures, that our LA Neighborhood Housing Service is having one of their monthly foreclosure and loan mitigation programs on Saturday at 9 to 2 at the Crenshaw Christian Center at 79th and Vermont. And so there are a number of experts that they'll have to help people mitigate or modify their loans. Also, many of us have worked with Lonnie during the years of doing streetscapes and a variety of construction programs, and they're going to have their 8th annual community forum on May 13th at USC Davison Center. And then finally, we've been entertained here in the council a number of times with the Lula Washington Dance Theater. They're going to be celebrating their 30th anniversary, and they're going to be holding this event at the Luckman Fine Arts Complex at Cal State LA on May 15th at 8 p.m.
Thank you very much. Can please rise for adjourning motions. Colleagues, I ask that we adjourn today in memory of Max Palevsky. I'm sure there's others that we can go around the circle and talk about. He was an immigrant son who made a fortune in the early days of the computer industry and then used his millions to build a notable art collection to finance liberal campaigns, including the late Tom Bradley's first successful bid for Los Angeles mayor. He died Wednesday at his Beverly Hills home at the age of 85. He's best known for selling scientific data systems to Xerox in 1969 for $1 billion. Went on to serve as director and chairman of Xerox's executive committee, and then later helped found Intel. but he left the corporate world in the 1970s to produce movies, finance a then-struggling magazine called Rolling Stone, and to delve into politics. I'm sure that Mr. Rosendahl can add some good stories to the time when he was an early supporter of George McGovern in 1972, then ran Bradley's successful 1973 bid for mayor, was a major backer of Robert Kennedy, Jimmy Carter during their presidential bids, and various campaigns of former Governor Gray Davis. His open checkbook and activism led to his branding in the 1970s as one of the Malibu Mafia, a loose alliance of extremely wealthy and well-connected Democrats such as Norman Lear and Stanley Scheinbaum, who joined together. But in later years, he seemed to sour on politics and concentrated more of his attention on art, building important collections of arts and crafts furniture and Japanese woodblock prints, which have been featured in shows at LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. He leaves behind Jody Evans, who was his wife, daughter Madeline Moskowitz, 4 sons Nicholas, Alexander, Jonathan, Matthew, a stepson Jan Krajewski III, and sister Helen Futterman, and 4 grandchildren. Ms. Hunt and Mr. Alarcon, did you want to add to that? Mr. Rosendahl, do you want to add any stories?
I'm sorry.
We'll do all members, but yeah, people want to add any stories.
Well, I just want to say that I knew Max quite well, and we worked together very closely in the George McGovern campaign, 1971-72. I was in charge of finances, dealing with the super rich, and those folks in those days could give unlimited amount of monies, and there were a lot of anti-war activists with passion against the war, of which Max was one of them. I'll never forget the day the senator and I met with Max in New York. We set up a special meeting in an airport. He was flying to Paris, and we were flying across the country to raise money. And Max offered the senator $1 million, and he would give it in installments of $350,000. The senator and I were obviously delighted. We were running a shoestring campaign, but we found across the country a bunch of Max Palevskis who believed so much passionately against the war that they made a huge difference. He would roll up his sleeves. He worked with his buddy Stanley Scheinbaum and Harold Willens and a whole lot of others and demonstrated a real commitment to social change. Jody Evans, who is presently and obviously the widow of great significance, created something with the energy of Max called Pink Ladies, which go out and confront issues all over the country, and I must say all over the world, in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. But the last time I saw Max was with one of the presidential candidates, the guy from Ohio, what's his name? Dennis Kucinich. See how quickly we forget. And Dennis and I went to the house, and we sat with Max, and Max was very gracious to Dennis Kucinich as he was running for president. And then I saw him most recently about a year ago, and he was in failing health, but he was very positive, and just reflecting on his life, he had made a huge difference, and may he rest in peace.
Thank you. Mr. Alarcon?
Yeah, I really don't have a political story. Max Palevsky was my dad's customer. My dad was an upholsterer, and when I was a little kid, my dad would take me on deliveries, and actually, you know, I delivered to many wealthy homes. My dad was, I would describe him as Tom Brokaw's Greatest Generation, classic, humble, and he knew his roots, and he always used to say, whenever Max Palevsky would get in the news for some liberal act, my dad would say, see, even rich people can do the right thing every once in a while. I distinctly remember his house in Malibu. He sold it many years ago, but I still gawk at what I saw. It was an enormous house that just went over the hill into the water, and it was a beautiful house. But I think in a funny kind of way, it gave me, as much as you know, I've challenged the wealthy and billionaires and all of that. It did temper my arguments because in many cases Max would be supporting many of the causes that I was fighting for, even dating back to college, and I was always pleased to see his name aligned with that. And my dad was always pleased too, because he would say that that's my customer. So for what that's worth, I just wanted to give him a good send-off. He did a lot of good things with the wealth he accumulated, and I only wish more billionaires like him would do the same.
Thank you. Any other adjourning motions? Yes. Ms. Hahn, and Mr. Kretz, then Ms. Berry.
Okay, thank you. I want us to... I would like us to adjourn today in the memory of a good friend of mine, Tom Bowles, who passed away just on Tuesday at the age of, I think, young, 65. Tom owned a successful accounting business in San Pedro and used his accounting skills to actively participate in the community. We in the community all knew that Tom was an accountant and a skilled person in his industry, but we always saw Tom serving on boards in the harbor area, giving his voluntary time to be the treasurer or the accountant of the particular organization. I knew him as when he was the treasurer on the board of directors for the Gang Alternatives program. You've heard me talk about GAP since I got elected, and I served on that board. I was actually president of that board for a couple of years. Tom was one of those who was just a great volunteer, but used his professional skills to help out a nonprofit organization. Tom was also a longstanding member, treasurer, and then president of the San Pedro Rotary Club. And he and his wife, Angie, were active longtime members of Holy Trinity Church. Tom had a terrific sense of humor, a real zest for life. He and Angie loved to travel together, and they were married for 45 wonderful years. I know she will miss him, as will everyone in the community, particularly those of us who were associated with GAP. A viewing of Tom will be held on Sunday, May 9th at 7 p.m. at Holy Trinity Church in San Pedro, and his funeral services will be held on Monday, May 10th, 10 a.m. at the Holy Trinity Church. We will miss you, Tom. You served us well. I also want us to adjourn the memory of Camille Castillo Fortino, who passed away on April 30th. She was a proud Sicilian. She grew up in Brooklyn, New York, where her family owned a neighborhood candy store. In 1962, Camille married Anthony Castillo, and they had 3 sons, Anthony, Joseph, and Robert. In 1975, following her brothers, Camille and her family moved to San Pedro. She also was an active member of the Holy Trinity Church, the Little Italian Club, and the St. Pietro Society. Camille was greatly loved by everyone. She was a friend of my mom. She actually lived in my mom's condominium unit in San Pedro. She leaves behind her second husband, Mike, sons Anthony, Joseph, Robert, her brother Santos, cousin Carol, grandchildren Anthony, Brianna, Joseph, Robert, Michael, Nicholas, Anthony, and many wonderful aunts, cousins, nieces, nephews, and godchildren. We'll miss you, Camille.
Mr. Kretz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to adjourn in memory of Jacqueline Perlson, who was born on May 23rd, 1924, and passed away on April 27th of this year at age 85. She probably had more, longer, and more varied involvement in nonprofits than anybody else I've heard of. She started her work in the community by going door to door with her mother, raising money for the United Way. She received her first Continuous Service Award from the United Jewish Welfare Fund in 1958, and after holding numerous leadership positions, she was named to the Women's Division as Women's Division Chairwoman in 1976. She served as an active advocate for the American Diabetes Association and chaired their major events in 1980 and 81. She was the treasurer and secretary of the Jewish Community Foundations. She was honored by the Jewish Family Service in 1995 with an Outstanding Volunteer Achievement Award and served as their president from 1996 through 98. She was twice recognized by the City of Los Angeles in 1984 and in 1998 for her leadership. She served for many years on the board of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religious School of Jewish Communal Service did many other things as well, but I don't want to spend the day listing all of them. She continued her dedication to her community, her family, and the city of Los Angeles until her death, and her work will be carried on by the many for whom she served as a mentor and friend. She was the beloved wife of her late husband, Herbert, for 43 years, cherished mother of Nina Luang, Paul and Kathy Prolson, Gary Prolson, Vicki Prolson, and Scott Willis, devoted and loving grandmother of Brian, Michael, and Diane. I've known her for a long, long time because her sons Paul and Gary were in junior high school with me. And I was able to watch all of her good work for many years. And for those who would like to make contributions, they can contribute to the Prolson Memorial Fund of the Jewish Family Service.
Wow, you were in junior president.
Ms. Perry.
And I'm going to ask that all members sign on to this adjourning motion, and this is just a precursor to one that will be more extensive once we get the information. On May 5th, 2010, Bill Elkins passed away, and Bill Elkins, as many of you know, was a special assistant for many, many years for Mayor Tom Bradley. His wife, Eleanor, and two sons, Larry and Bill, two grandchildren, survive him. He is a former officer and director of the probation department, executive director of Teen Post, before joining the mayor's staff as a special assistant. Under his watch, and with the mayor's support and leadership, he established programs for seniors, young people, and people who were disabled under his division of human services. He was Mayor Bradley's point person for intergroup relations, and specifically at the time, African American and Jewish relations, affirmative action programs in the city, and he was and continued to be a longtime member and trustee at Second Baptist Church, which is located in the 9th District. And I think many of you know that he and Mayor Bradley were longtime neighborhood friends growing up near each other in South Los Angeles. He was also a member of the board of the Spiegel and Milken Foundations and an appointee to the State Personnel Board. He had a long and distinguished public and community service career, and he was an avid and skilled poker player. Information regarding his funeral services is pending, and as soon as we get more information and details, I'll bring it back next week. But in the meantime, I thought we could get this process started and ask that all members be on this adjourning motion.
Thank you. Mr. Labange.
Yeah, I just want to say it's sad to hear of Bill Elkins passing. His impact with the Bradley administration was legendary. He absolutely cared about Tom Bradley and the initiatives of the mayor, and as Jan mentioned, the youth, the aged, the seniors, and disabled. And I remember on the 21st floor of City Hall, you would go there, and that's where he was. But he always had the ear of the mayor, and he was truly a remarkable individual. Olivia Mitchell, who is now with our Community Development Department, was the Director of Youth Development for the city when I was on the Youth Council those years ago. And I remember Bill Elkins coming in on a Saturday to talk to us and talk about aging. And why he talked about aging, he said, someday you'll get there. And now as a 56-year-old man, I understand a little about what Bill was talking as we look forward. God rest his soul. He truly was a warrior for Tom Bradley, which was so special when you see that in the mayor's office. Very special man.
Thank you. Mr. Elkham?
Yeah. I obviously would like to also extend my condolences to the family of Bill Elkins. He, you couldn't get hired in the mayor's office unless Bill interviewed you. And so before I was hired, he interviewed me, and I eked by. But I also knew Bill when I was president of the Chicano Employees Association for the City of Los Angeles, because Bill was an absolute fierce fighter for and believed in affirmative action, and he, in many respects, represented the social conscience of the Bradley administration, because he believed in fighting for the least among us. He believed in youth programming because of his work with probation. He believed that more people who were underprivileged needed to get a chance, and he was absolutely, he was Mayor Bradley's best man. I believe he was his best man at his wedding. And so he was a great guy. He was a fierce protector of Mayor Bradley, but he would also he was a loyal advisor to the mayor as well. And so I learned a lot from him in a lot of different ways, whether it be inside the mayor's office or after leaving to become a city council member. He was always willing to express advice and was always a passionate fighter for his community. God bless him.
Thank you. We'll put all members on that as well. Mr. Parks?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to comment on Bill Elkins. Even though he spent all those years in the mayor's office, he was still known as Mr. Team Post out in the community because that's where he basically made a major impact. Very recently, we had worked with him in the last couple of years in trying to move forward on a Bradley heritage stamp. And he was very helpful. One of the things I think that's a positive in the fact that there's a young lady by the name of Sotomayor that's putting together a movie about Bradley's life, and she was able to capture Bill comments and the historical verbal perspective of the Bradley years very recently, and so that's something that will be on tape and a part of that documentary as time moves on.
Thank you. If there's no other adjourning motions, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll? We'll next be in session this coming Tuesday at 10 a.m. here in the John Farrow Council Chambers, and a very happy Mother's Day to everybody out there, every mother. Thank you very much. We'll see you next Tuesday. This meeting is adjourned.